Yeah, we're off. Hi, guys.
Absolutely. We have to watch what we say. We
I know.
we like Hello, everyone. It's Doug Woodward. I'm just having a great time here with two of my friends.
Hey, Diane. Hi,
from
Shawnee. Good to
a
see you
decade
guys.
ago. And actually, I've stayed, current with one and not as much with the other. But anyway, we're going to get together. We're going to do what I think is going to be a great show. We're going to look at what's happened over the last 10 years since the three of us wrote and published a book called The Final Babylon. So let's see if I can hold that up. Is that coming through? Is that coming through? So
Yeah,
The
very
Final
good.
Babylon. Very good. And so, we published that in June of 2015. So we're just about 3 weeks before the 10-year anniversary. So we debuted the book in Colorado Springs at a
Okay, this will be interesting. They wrote a book 10 years ago about America being the final Babylon, and they're going to check out what's happened since. This should be really interesting.
a prophecy in the news, may it rest in peace, conference. Prophecy Watchers is still going. Prophecy in the news is deceased by about
Oh, really? I did
2 or
not know
3
that.
years. Yes. It
Oh,
ended.
my.
It ended soon after I had done about 10 of the interviews, and then
Really? Is there a causal connection?
I'm hinting that there is, but there's not really. But it seemed funny to say. So anyway, so we're going to talk about world issues. We're going to talk about what's happened to America over the last 2 years. The thesis of The Final Babylon, which I'm not 100% with still 10 years later, but I'm still pretty much with. The thesis is that America is the final Babylon. And so in the book, it basically says that it's both the daughter of Babylon from Jeremiah 51, but also it says, the book says that it's Mystery Babylon, which is in Revelation 17.
Mhm.
Babylon the Great is discussed in Revelation 18. So we're going to talk about that. That's going to be one of the themes that we'll kind of get around to. And we'll probably vote at the end about whether we still think America is the final Babylon.
Yeah.
I have a suspicion that
Yeah, Shawnee, I reckon the great mystery Babylon, that's probably the Jesuit influence on the whole planet. If anything, I'd think it'd be the Jesuits as the Babylon, but America is one of their key bases, I think.
the verdict's going to be pretty much what it was 10 years ago. So without further ado, let me introduce my compadres. You know him well, Doug Krieger and Dean McGriff. So, gentlemen, welcome to the hot seat. And I'll turn on the gallery view here for a second so people can see all of us. And then we'll jump in and we'll start talking. So let's see here. Tell us a little bit about what's happened in your life over the last 10 years. I would love to know, and I think there's a few people out there would like to know as well. So please enlighten us if you would.
Wow.
I've been working with some people who are trying to do Christian communities around the country in
Okay.
South Dakota and down in Arkansas. And I think, just preparation in general, but, not that we're going to.
Diane, that link, that's why all the Muslim countries, their flags are red, white, green, and black. The colours of the four horsemen. it's a class of civilizations we're about to go into.
Avoid any any of the problems that may come our way. But doing that and just still following the news, following the economy, especially. Very interesting. So that's
Now
about it.
you were one of those economic hitmen, as I recall.
I was.
In one of your earlier renditions. Not to use that word wrongly, but tell us a little bit about. Have you followed at all USAID? And,
Haven't I been hitting anybody lately?
yeah. That's right.
Well, I really have been involved in a very interesting project down in Indonesia, and I spend hours on it every day practically. It's oil refineries they're wanting to build out there. The Saudis realized that, and all the Emirates realized they needed to get their oil out of the Middle East and into a place where it's a little safer. And so
That's oil production, not storage, though, correct?
well, they happen to do both, because if you don't move it very quickly, you have to have a lot of storage available. So they're building half a dozen refineries in Indonesia now.
Wow. Well,
That's kind of one thing I've been involved in.
okay, well, that's good. All right, well, and I know you've been enjoying some travel, and that's got to have been a nice break for you.
Oh, it was great. My wife and I took off in our trailer and traveled for about 8 years.
Yeah.
Gosh,
It was
good.
fun.
I definitely envy you that. So I'm still waiting to have a vacation.
Okay, it's already glaring. Damn.
But anyway,
It's time. Definitely
it is time. So, all right, Doug Krieger. This guy has also been really busy the last 2 years. Doug, I don't want you to take more than 2 or 3 minutes, but tell us kind of what you've been doing.
Well, the last 10 years, thanks to S. Douglas Woodward, I have gotten into the publication business myself. And I think
Shawnee, they already have. They've already infiltrated everywhere.
we're at a
In Paris, there's a whole quarter of the city you can't go in because it's run by the Muslims and it's not safe for Gentiles to go in there.
65 books
Not Gentiles,
Wow.
Christians.
that have been done for other people, as well as my own writings. I have written about 15 books during this period of time. And of course, as you know, by 2015, when we met, Doug, I had retired from the public school system,
Right.
of which I now am very thrilled that I have. But in any event, over the last 10 years or so, I have looked at our original thesis of America. I always call the book America, the Final Babylon. I don't usually entitle it The Final Babylon. And of course, the secondary title is America and the Coming of Antichrist. And I probably am more emphatic about what is going on in the geopolitical world today than perhaps I have ever been. But very, very busy the last 2 years. We are involved in a variety of ministries in which the emphasis is upon the unity of the body of Christ in answer to Jesus' prayer in John 17 with regards to the fact that when Jesus said, I'm going to build my ecclesia, that what he had in mind was a very participatory, contributory environment where God's people could come together, each one having a portion of the Lord's gift and ministry in their own lives to be shared one by one in our
40% of Russia's army is Muslim. 40% of them.
gatherings.
That sounds great.
Yeah, and it has been very, very. And then I'm involved in a men's ministry. This is my shirt, freedom.
All right.
Kind of a William Wallace there.
Oh,
And,
okay. We got the nails.
It's very much
there.
that way. And
Those are probably the nails of the cross, though, aren't they?
yeah, this is you got it. The nails of the cross. See?
Yeah.
And then we have a tendency to nail things on the cross, literally, in the form of whatever is holding you back from moving your life on with the Lord, to bring it to the cross and to leave it there, and to move on with your life with the Lord. So that's sort of what we've been doing. And by the way, for those of you who do not know who I am, I found out over the course of the last 10 years that I'm a direct descendant of Martin Luther. So the nails are very important to me.
Right on the Wittenberg door.
Hey, Phil, good to see you, mate.
Wittenberg doors.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a joy to me to
Yeah.
have known that association. And
Yes.
to move on with the Lord. So
Great.
that's a little bit about my background.
All right. All right. Well, it's been, just a fantastic journey, I think. A lot of people have read The Final Babylon, and it still appropriately states the, kind of the core position that we started off with, that America is the final Babylon, and the subtitle, The Coming of the Antichrist. Of course, that's really one of the real key factors is, in fact, does America birth the Antichrist? And if so, of course, we ought to have to stop and say, okay, well, who was that? So let's start off with, kind of some of the basic thoughts. I guess the first way that we start the book off is we say Rome has not revived. And by that, we were basically either just asserting or lamenting that the teaching that we all kind of grew up with of Hal Lindsey, the late great Planet Earth, Tim LaHaye, and all of that the way that the prophetic scenario was structured was that it was all going to be 10 European nations, the common market, they were going to come together, they were going to rule the world. America would just sort of disappear because of the rapture of the church, because there are so many Americans that are Christians. It would just devastate the country. We'd like to think that, but we kind of don't think that. And it's
The law of diminishing returns has sort of set in.
That's true. So let's do a kind of a quick assessment, in terms of our view of, has it supplanted the United States as the primary political and economic power and military power that's dominating the world? Let's start with that. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, Europe doesn't even have an army of its own offensive. So there isn't much they can do. And they've shown themselves to be incredibly weak in their economy. But the one thing I wanted to emphasize in what you alluded to is that we are Rome. In other words, the Greek Roman culture culminated in America, just like the little horn came out of the 10 and ruled the 10 in Revelation. And so for us to say we're not European belies the fact that we're speaking English. We have our courts, our legislature, all of our laws based on Roman law or English and so forth. So there's been a migration over to the West, but it's across the ocean. And just the fact that they couldn't describe, didn't know who we are, they did a pretty good job describing it. Not only that, but we've been identified as Israel's only friend, which you would all attest to.
Right. Well, and look at our statues and monuments in Washington, D.C. that are basically Greco-Roman.
They sure are, yeah.
Right. And so the Greco-Roman culture, we are the dominant force in making that happen. Notwithstanding, we're also the primary force in making popular American culture around the world.
Popularizing.
Popularizing.
Radio voice.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. That was helpful in getting to my proper verb form. So,
You never know when you need one.
That's right. So tell us, Krieger, what do you think about, is Europe revived? If the Lord were to come back soon, would we?
Yes. I want to disabuse some of my prophetical partners out there, and these are hills I'm not necessarily willing to die for.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, I think that our understanding of the geopolitical world is extremely valid insofar as, insofar as the current situation goes. I heard the other day that there are, in fact, I just received a message on my internet from a very well-known prophetical ministry that the United States is currently being overshadowed by the old concept that our dear brother Hal Lindsey popularized about the 10 nations that you've alluded to arising in Europe, and that we're just one of the gang at best, or maybe not even there now that we've been raptured out of here, as you again alluded to. So,
relax in your Mimosa outdoors with a wide range of stylish, comfortable options.
that Dean is nailed it on the head. You look at the current struggle between Russia and Ukraine, or between Russia and NATO, with us leading the charge. We have contributed, participated. We have troops in Poland. We have troops in Romania. We have troops in the former Baltic states.
And
We have a lot of troops.
we have troops in Ukraine too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another. Yeah, we don't want to go too
Pervert
far.
Island.
We just don't want to talk about it.
Yeah,
we
don't
just
wanna
want to talk about
No, they won't get Pervert Island. The Muslims will take that.
And so, with the Hawks and the current administration, the so-called neocons,
Yeah, we haven't
and
seen
the
you for a few days,
perpetual
Phil. We missed you,
machinery
mate.
of war
Mhm.
that has beware of the military-industrial complex.
Mhm.
Currently, it is in this country and throughout the world in fine fiddle, and to say otherwise is ridiculous. It's in such fine fiddle that they could get rid of a person like Tucker Carlson, as far as I'm concerned,
Mhm.
and do so with great finesse and abruptly. The criticism that Mr. Carlson, Dr. Carlson, actually, his PhD.
I didn't realize he was a
Was-
PhD.
Yeah, he's a PhD.
Cool.
Absolutely. He's a brilliant man. But
He's very-
Yeah, I like Tucker Carlson.
anyway, yeah, very smart. And of course, he was thought, he was a Putin stooge, eventually proclaimed as. And currently, his character is being besmirched by a raft of, individuals that are ganging up on him. But
Right.
this military-industrial complex is so strong and so powerful that to come up against it is absurd. It would take, with what we still have 11 of these gigantic aircraft fortresses,
Mhm.
and 40 to 50 Trident submarines with their nuclear capabilities roaming the oceans of the earth. There is no way the Chinese or the Russians could ever catch up with the military industrial complex that we have put together over the course of the last, since Teddy Roosevelt, quite frankly. And as a result of the Civil War, even in this country, where we became truly a world power. So,
Well, do you think that all of the talk about China as
Mhm.
our new nemesis,
Hey,
which
Bas, good
is
to see you,
sort of
mate.
sinking into the background, if you will, do you think that's just propaganda to encourage Americans to support more spending in the military-industrial complex?
frankly, yes.
Mhm.
Let me just be overtly overt on this matter, because for China to think that they could,
Yeah, it probably is.
take Taiwan with the Philippines, South Korea, Japan, other southeastern nations of Asia, Southeast Asian nations like Vietnam in particular.
Mhm.
I mean, who looks at China as the enemy, and
Yes.
let alone Australia, New Zealand. I mean, that whole complex of nations is desperately reaching out to the United States right about now. What we're doing in Guam, for example, a lot of people are not aware of this. We have made Guam a major military
Hey, Wayne, good to see you.
expression, if you would, in the Western Pacific, and that has resulted because we're moving out, almost completely out of Okinawa. We realized that had pretty well run its course, and so with Guam, we're able to do far more military endeavors, and also what do we have, Dean? I think it's something like 10 to 20,000 Marines, no less, stationed in Australia, which is phenomenal.
We're also
It's very
building,
bad.
I never knew that. 20,000 Marines are in Australia. What?
building and rebuilding all kinds of bases in the Philippines.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're very active in Asia, very, very active.
It does appear that we are potentially setting up an opportunity to have a war with China in the South China Sea, probably limited there, although the threat of nuclear missiles coming our direction, remains almost a
The Philippines would be like a giant aircraft carrier for America to attack China with.
probable outcome if we went to war with either Russia or China.
Well, let's get biblical here, Doug.
All right, let's do it. Let's dive in.
Well, let's get biblical here with regards to the kings of the east and rumors from the north will trouble him in Daniel chapter 11.
Mm-hmm.
What are we really looking at here? And I have put together a presentation over which I've never really given an actual kind of animated presentation on the
Mm-hmm.
so-called, what I have dubbed the 3 prophetic wars of the last days.
Well, that's great.
And-
Let's. I've enabled you to share your screen because I think you
Mhm.
have a slide that can be a good place to talk from.
And the scriptures, getting biblical here, that I have taken, the 3 wars, let's just cut to the chase. You're looking at a map of the Middle East,
Mm-hmm.
primarily, and also the East, India. You're looking at parts of the European states, Africa, a little bit of the north there. But the 3 prophetic wars that I see in scripture have to do with the Oracle of Damascus. If you look at the chart right underneath the 3 prophetic wars,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see Zechariah chapter 9. And let me just briefly talk about the Oracle of Damascus. Could I, for just a second? Interrupt
Sure.
me anytime, guys.
Yep. No, go
But
ahead.
But I believe that there are 3 primary wars. One is called the Oracle of Damascus. The other is the Gog Magog war. This is in red. And down below is what Dwight Pentecost of Dallas Theological Seminary, the late Dwight Pentecost.
I remember that.
Remember, he entitled it the Armageddon Campaign. It's not a
Yes.
battle.
Mm-hmm.
It is a series of battles. It's a whole war. And he dubbed it the Armageddon Campaign, which would happen within the context of the end of days. And just as a brevity on this, when I was in Israel back in the 80s, I was told that the Jewish people, that the Israelis, were not really predisposed or did not know that much about the book of Daniel, because certain rabbinical figures over the course of history had placed a curse upon reading, in particular, Daniel chapter 9.
Hmm.
It was a shock to me to find out that the provost of Bar Ilan University, who also was a professor of English for the Bar Ilan, the largest Orthodox university in the world, that he was absolutely unfamiliar with the book of Daniel.
Yeah.
And but then, lo and behold, I found 30 Israelis in kind of an upper room setting. It was a shock to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was invited over for strawberries and chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
And I went into the room, all of Israelis, Jewish completely, right? And they said to me, please, could we hear about the book of Daniel? Do you think, Mr. Krieger, that we are living at the end of time in the book of Daniel? And where do we fit in? And where do you fit in? Of course, I was not adverse. to
Oh
sharing
boy!
my
You talk about an open door being laid.
It was kind of like a, well, and it was shock to me because I had heard that they're not supposed to get into the book of Daniel. That is a misnomer.
Yeah.
And they are very interested in the prophetical understanding of the scriptures as it pertains to the book of Daniel.
I bet.
And so we started getting into the Oracle of Damascus, the Magog War, and the Armageddon campaign. In the Oracle of Damascus, Dean and I think it was Dean, weren't we at Doug Shear's place when we shared on the Oracle of Damascus? It's an outdoor barbecue.
Oh yeah, I was out in the front yard. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm the front yard.
yeah,
And
yeah.
this was before the current Syrian civil war, so called.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been talking about the Oracle of Damascus, that Damascus in Isaiah 17, and Zechariah 9, that it was going to become a ruinous heap. It would become a ruinous heap. And of course, Damascus indicates all of Syria, just like Washington, D.C. constitutes the United States and so forth.
Mhm.
So in Zechariah 9 in particular, it brings forth, John Woolward called the book of Zechariah the stereoscopic eschatological vision, the greatest book for prophecy ever written. And outside of the book of Revelation, of course, but very insightful of him to declare this. Now, I want to bring out one thing. In Zechariah chapter 9, it talks about this oracle of Damascus and the destruction of Damascus and so forth. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I believe
We
it's
learn so
Zechariah
much from
chapter
Diane's
9,
links,
verses
don't we,
10
Wyatt?
and 11, right
Thanks,
through there.
Diane. They're brilliant.
It says, "Behold, your king is coming to you. He is meek and lowly and riding on a donkey, and the colt, the foal of the donkey, and of the increase of his kingdom there shall be no end." What is that all about? And why is it right there at the Oracle of Damascus? All four Gospels record Zechariah 9 in those two messianic verses.
You think that's important?
Now, I think that is so incredibly wonderful. Okay. I have a tendency to get excited once in a while. Okay.
Yes.
Especially about this. Why would the first and second coming of our Lord Jesus Christ be recorded immediately following the Oracle of Damascus? Doug, I believe that we are living in the second coming of Christ. When the Messiah is presented, he is presented in his first and second comings,
Amen.
all in 2 verses in Zechariah, right after the oracle. So we're living in that messianic anticipation.
I've got to move you along to some other things here in your 3 prophetic wars, but that is a tremendous insight, and
Yes.
another one that I hadn't realized. So I continue to be taught by Doug Creeper, and I thank you for that. That's really a great.
Isn't it amazing? There's no other reason.
Amazing.
You
Well,
can't
now-
explain that. Yes.
I know. So now my next question is, where is the Psalm 83 war, Doug?
The Psalm 83 war is really connected to the Gog-Magog war, quite frankly, because it involves Elam,
Okay.
and that's Persia.
Yeah.
And that leads us to war number 2.
I was going to say the Psalm 83 war, though, is of course been put forth by Bill Salas, who's done a lot of great work. But it's one that it looks like that really is not part of the prophetic scenario of the end times. That it really referred to historical event in the time of King David. So
Yes.
anyway, I just wanted you to bring that out or talk about that for a second, and then move right on into Gog Magog, if you would.
Yes. That comes out also. Obadiah talks about that Elam circumstance. So you have that war interjected here, but I believe it can be incorporated into the alliances that are clearly mentioned. Now, if you look at the Oracle of Damascus on the chart, you'll see Syria and the ancient names: Hadrach, Hamath in the north, Lebanon, Tyre and Sidon, modern Hezbollah, Gaza, ancient Philistia, modern Hamas, the stronghold of Ephraim. And by the way, when I was in Israel, the Israelis said, guess what? Ramallah is to us the stronghold of Ephraim. It's the modern West Bank and the Palestinian Authority. They're all involved in this war.
And they represent Ephraim in that sense then, okay.
Right, at that point. And then also I thought Jordan was not involved, but as it turns out, one of the changes I've made in my chart is that there is some indication that the areas of Jordan, and they're given as ancient designations, but they have modern day
equivalents.
Yes, absolutely. And so you go into the Gog-Magog war.
I have to comment though real quickly that it's good that you are still showing some of your dispensational roots, because you have to have a chart to be able to explain.
Yes, without a chart, the people perish.
That's right. That's why they say that there's, the 30-minute silence in heaven.
Yeah.
In
Rearrange
Revelation.
the chart.
So we can rearrange our charts.
Yes, Clarence Larkin.
Yes, there you go. Where would we be
greatest
without
book
those
on
neat little drawings he did?
Yes.
Amen. Amen. Okay. Well,
so the Gog-Magog war hits.
Yeah, I think that's the question is well, first off, I should say, to close off on the Oracle of Damascus, do you feel like that the destruction of Damascus, what has happened, has in fact been a fulfillment of that prophecy, or is there sort of more destruction to come, do you think?
Well, yes, I do, on both answers. Number one is that when we had that barbecue and talked about the Oracle of Damascus, it had not yet happened. I was sharing some of this through some of our websites. Had a gal call me from Damascus, and she said, "Mr. Krieger, I would prefer that you not talk about Damascus and its destruction, because I live here and we have a very beautiful city. And by the way, we have the outskirts of Damascus, the oldest continuously inhabited city on the planet is Damascus." And she was correct. And I said, "Well, honey, if I were you, I'd clear out of Dodge while the getting was good." And
well, we can tell that to about 11 million people in New York City too, right?
Yes, yes. Well, in fact, in Syria, 14 million people have become refugees. 14 million out of an original population of somewhere around 25 million.
So over half.
So over half of the population of Syria have left.
I could name a few American politicians that are at fault for that, but it would not be allowed by YouTube, so I won't.
Oh, okay. Well, we won't go. Oh, we're regulated under the YouTube.
Absolutely. We have to watch what we say. We
I know.
We'd like to get
by the way, I want to just share something real that's associated with this chart.
Okay.
When I started talking on this, I was contacted by the Department of Defense about my analysis. And they said, "Where are you getting this from?" And I said, "I'm getting it from the Book of Books." And they said, "We find your analysis very fascinating. And we're just wondering, how are you coming up with this stuff?" No kidding. This is no joke. Okay.
Yep.
So
that
anyway,
is amazing. And by the way, that's fantastic. By the way, tell us, what was the outcome of the 30 Israelis in the upper room that you talked to?
well, yeah, it went on for 3 hours, which was unbelievable. They just kept asking questions. It went into midnight, and I finally said, "I'm somewhat exhausted, folks. Is there a way we can wrap this up somehow and maybe talk about this at a later date?" And but the end product was they were just all excited. It was just so much of a blessing to be there and talk about the scriptures. And
No altar call?
What's that?
No altar call?
No, we didn't have an altar call. It was like we were all at the altar to begin with.
I like that.
And I said, "You have to understand, the two witnesses prior to the witness of the olive trees and the witness of the lampstands." I have a theory on that. The Old Testament, the New Testament, which is the Seventh-day Adventist kind of teaching anyway, but that the God's elect are constituted in Judah, and the Ephraim that has been swallowed up of the nations and that his elect are coming from both the olive trees and the lampstands, which are the churches, and that these two in the latter days are corporate witnesses to the deliverance wrought through the Messiah. And that Messiah, of course, we affirm to be our Lord Jesus, and the Jewish people, I think, are predisposed, those who really believe the scriptures, to Mashiach ben Joseph, the Messiah as seen in Joseph.
Yeah.
And so we'll see here as God opens it up. But anyway, the second war is the Gog-Magog war, and I'm with Arnold Fruchtenbaum, who believes that will happen at the commencement of the 70th week of Daniel, which we're approaching very closely. And by the way, that woman called me back in Damascus and said, and this is interesting, after, her home was destroyed. She lives in the suburbs of Damascus.
Yeah.
And she said, how did you know all these things?
Yeah.
And in my great humility, I said, I got that from the book of books. And, but anyway, very interesting. And but it leads and feeds into the Gog-Magog. And that's found in Ezekiel 38, Daniel 11. And then the Gog-Magog, king of the north, the chief prince of Nishak and Togarmah, Persia, king of the south, is Ethiopia. I had at this point put in Cush and Ethiopia, but the king of the south really is not Cush. Cush is ancient Assyria, actually.
Yeah.
And then
Cush of the north.
Yeah, right. Cush of the north. It's not Cush of the south. Although there is a Cush of the south. But this is the Cush of the north. And then Libya, Egypt, all the northern tier of African states versus, now check this out, versus Israel, the glorious land, the willful king of Daniel 11, the merchants of Tarshish, which in our book, folks, you've got to get this book because it's relevant to this day.
Still relevant.
It's still relevant. It's more relevant now, Doug, than ever.
That's
and
true.
Then thirdly, Sheba and Dedan are the modern states of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. I did have on here at one time modern Jordan, but I see Jordan more involved in the Gog-Magog war and so forth. But anyway, Armageddon campaign is after the 40 days, I believe it will take, because in Gog-Magog, you clean up the weapons and the land over a 7-year time frame, and 7 months. Then you have 7 years, and so during that time is the Armageddon campaign, because the Antichrist, after the conclusion in Daniel 11 of the Gog-Magog war, which is seen in Daniel 11 and in Ezekiel 38 and parts of 39, then you will see that he, the willful king, will hear of rumors from the north and from the east. East is mentioned first, then the north, and I still feel that will be the World War III. I hate to say it, but I don't think that the Lord is silent with regards to the end of days, the end of time, as far as we know it as now, and that he has given us major clues in the scripture as to the unfolding of these cataclysmic conflicts at the end of days.
Right.
What we are witnessing right now in Ukraine is the solidification of NATO as led by the United States of America. If you don't think we are at the forefront of that conflict against Russia, then you are just whistling in the breeze somewhere. We are not only at the forefront, we are utterly leading the charge militarily, with equipment, and with so many other aspects of this thing, even though we feign as if we are this
freedom-loving, democratic.
We are. We're so freedom-loving. Very peaceful.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, do we have, let me ask Dean to jump in here. Give him a chance to chit-chat with us. Do you think that our current administration is keen to get us into a war?
Lynn, I posted them Muslim comments about Jesus being God. I'm just waiting for replies.
And what do you make of the Ukraine event as part of the, I guess, the lead up to the Gog-Magog war?
Well, I don't know how much we should say on this format, but it certainly looks that way, doesn't it?
YouTube is watching you.
Be careful about what names you use.
I mean,
You don't-
it doesn't seem to appear that way. You keep
That's right.
kicking the bear, and you kick the lion, the tiger.
Right. We'll
Yeah,
just say the administration. That's all.
Right,
all we'll
right.
say, right.
because I mean, this country, just to remind everybody, during the last administration, we were the #1 producer of natural gas and oil in the whole wide world,
Mm,
and we could very easily return to that and just.
right.
No, I mean, our whole history is built around our ability to produce energy, and that's what gives us our wealth and our power and everything else. But for example, in the Permian Basin, West Texas, they just recently jumped, according to the USGS, from 22 billion to 46 billion barrels of oil in their reserves.
Mhm.
And we're just awash with oil, which we can't get at very often, very easily, but we're also awash in natural gas. And that pipeline kind of blew up spontaneously in the bottom of the ocean, you know.
Yeah, it wasn't that as spontaneous.
All of a
We-
sudden,
And we had nothing. We had
no,
nothing.
no,
to do
of
with
course.
that.
I know nothing.
Might have been some
Schultz.
whales down there chewing on the pipe, or I don't know what. But at any rate, then of course Europe, we saved them this winter because they started building forts, and we started. One thing that this administration, a lot of people don't know, we had 3 LNG tankers, the tankers that carry this frozen gas, when Biden took office, and he built 20 more in the first 2 years.
Phil, post your Facebook link so the guys can see you do your sermon.
Of his administration, he's building another 20. So he knows that this is a hot commodity, and it saved Europe's
Bacon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but at any rate, I mean, we are still, that country that has tremendous reserves as a breadbasket too, because we've been wiping out breadbaskets here and there.
Yeah. Yeah. We somebody destroyed the breadbasket in Ukraine. And, we kind of think we know who did that, but could it be Putin? Well,
Hi,
anyway,
Eileen.
that's a name we probably can mention. Is
We can probably mention that.
That's right. Probably can. Well, that's great, and it's so true, and that's really another one of the sort of core assumptions in our book.
Yeah.
Is that there really is no other country or series of countries or alliances that can that can catch up with or equal to the capabilities, the resources, the even manufacturing capability. Although we got to be careful about what we do and don't manufacture in China, but we're #1, and
If you think about it, Russia has gone down to its GDP lower than Texas, state of Texas.
Yeah, it's not looking
just
good. It's not looking
not
good for them.
And China's usually a paper tiger. It's just paper. It's a facade, but there isn't. They built these cities, and the cities are empty. They built the suburbs, and the suburbs are empty. That they're really good at building things, but they can't follow through. So
Right.
I'm not worried about them.
Yeah, well, there's that analyst, consultant that's all over everybody's interview talking about the end of the world is just the beginning, and he's predicting that China will be
Amen, Wyatt.
basically completely without any ability to project power within less than 10 years, and it's all based on demographics.
Yeah, their population is decreasing like crazy.
Yeah.
Because they kept the 2-birth thing, and it was really way below,
Mhm.
and they're just cruising for bruising.
And people jumping out of windows.
We have a lot of Hispanics. If we want to send some of our immigrants.
Oh gosh, he didn't say that. He really didn't.
He didn't say that.
He didn't say that.
Definitely. But he also speaks Spanish. So
That's true. He does speak Spanish very well.
it's very redemptive.
Yeah. I say this is kind of like Tucker Carlson and what he said, and of course he's accused of being a racist for making comments like that. So
Oh yeah.
So all right, so let's go back to What I wanted to do to introduce the Gog Magog War, Doug, if I might, is comment on the the theory of the Islamic Antichrist.
Mahdi.
And that one of the core assumptions of the Gog Magog War in that theory, that scenario, is that the Antichrist and Gog are one and the same, and that there is only one final war, and it's really the Gog Magog War and the Armageddon campaign all wrapped into one. And and once it happens, Jesus comes at the end of that, and that's the end of the natural history until Jesus takes the throne in Jerusalem. So what do this is over the last 10 years, Joe Richardson, who's a great brother.
Oh, yeah.
But he has been very successful in promoting the Islamic Antichrist point of view. And so what are your thoughts on that? That's certainly something we should speak to.
Well, let me disabuse you of that one too, because the fact of the matter is that in the Gog-Magog conflagration, it would appear that Satan's kingdom is divided. What do I mean by that? If he had it his way, he would destroy every human being on the face of the earth, because he is going to be defeated by Jesus Christ, who has led many sons and is leading many sons to glory. And therefore, the captain of our salvation will not be defeated. Humanity will persist upon the planet, and his kingdom, Satan's kingdom, is divided between the forces of the Antichrist and those forces known as the Gog-Magog confederation of states in the last days. In other words, the willful king of Daniel chapter 11 is identified with the merchants of Tarshish. And we have to understand that is the ancient Phoenician commercial empire that was absorbed by the Borg, known as the Roman Empire, who defeated Hannibal, so well presented by the articulate person of Doug Woodward in our book again, which I want to put out here. Okay.
Folks, I didn't pay him a fee for this promotion, but I do appreciate it.
But the thing of it is this, and I know it's quite popular to take the blame off of Babylon the Great. Babylon the Great kept moving ever westward. Part of our thesis is that Babylon is the heart of that great city that kept moving. The Persian Empire kept moving westward, as you know, challenging. You remember the movie, The 300, and then they were defeated, Artaxerxes and so forth. And then
that was a great movie, The 300.
We have the Grecian Empire, and ever moving westward, and then Rome itself ever moving westward, and then contending simultaneously with the Phoenician commercial empire, and eventually the Borg absorbed it. And interestingly enough, this westward movement through the pillars of Hercules, through Tarshish of the Iberian Peninsula, not the Tarshish of Antioch, but the Tarshish of the Iberian Peninsula,
which is
where which is Hispania and so forth.
Right.
They were the ones, the Phoenicians, who we presenting in our book. Actually, there is a multitude of evidence. The Phoenicians were trading all over North America, up the Mississippi, down the St. Lawrence Expressway, you might say, and then they were all over the place, right? And so we're saying that a good dispensational teaching is that Babylon the Great eventually is judged. In the book of Revelation, chapter 17, there is a religious expression of Babylon, the woman who rides the beast. Then there in Revelation 18 is the judgment of commercial Babylon, and the merchants of the earth stand afar and witness her smoke rising up in 1 hour and so forth. We can talk about that. And then thirdly, political Babylon, the administrative hub of Babylon, great city, is eventually destroyed with Satan, the false prophet, and so forth, being dispensed with by the intervention of Christ himself. And so those
let me
three
ask you
aspects.
the comment on the connection between the Phoenicians and the Canaanites and the Phoenicians and the Carthaginians.
Well, first of all, the very good observation on that one, Doug, because the word Canaanite, interestingly enough, at the last verse of the book of Zechariah, you find a very peculiar verse. It says, "Never again shall the Canaanite ever have access to the house of the Lord, to the temple of the living God." In other words, when Jesus threw out the merchants twice, the merchandisers twice from the temple, he had something in mind there in the book of John. And what is of interest to me is, why does it say the Canaanite will never again be in the house of the Lord? Because the word Canaanite literally means merchandiser.
Mm-hmm.
So the merchants of Canaan, you have the 11 sons
I never knew that. That's interesting.
of Canaan versus the 12 sons of Jacob. Okay, you have this incredible juxtaposition. And 11 signals the number of the Antichrist, Haman and his 10 sons. Judas made it 11. Okay, you have the little horn out of the 10, making it 11. And so 11 versus God's government of 12. The triune God, 3 with creation, 4. 3 times 4 is 12. And you have this 12 versus this 11. So you begin to look at Canaan, the land of Canaan. The God's 12 are going to possess the 11. Can you follow me there?
Oh, yes.
So they are in the land of Canaan, and in particular, the epicenter of the land of Canaan is Tyre and Sidon. You have the king of Tyre, who morphs into, quite frankly, Lucifer, the son of the morning. He is the archetype of Satan, okay, the king of Tyre. Tyre and Sidon were known for their the commencement of the purple people, the Phoenicians. You heard the Punic Wars, the purple people eaters, right?
Right.
And they are the purple people due to the fact that these mollusks that were in the Mediterranean Sea near Tyre, it take 1,000 of them to get a little thimble of purple, but it goes a long way. Right? It's a dye they use. You know, Lydia the purple dyer. And then you've got this strange expression in the book of Revelation about all they that dwell, that use purple for their, purple is judged in Revelation 18. Okay, and so you have this amazing purple people, Phoenician in Greek, Punic in Rome, okay? And so these two are actually the same people. And so the Phoenicians kept moving their commercial empire ever westward. And they started in Tyre and Sidon. It's the Canaanites. They're the ancient Canaanites, for goodness sakes. Hannibal was a Canaanite, okay? And
I never knew that. The Carthage was Canaanites. I know a bit about the Punic Wars because I love ancient Rome history, the wars and all that. I never knew that they were Canaanites. I do know that Rome had no problem wiping them out because they sacrificed their children quite often. I do know they didn't like that.
So you've got these Canaanites moving. These merchants of the earth are moving. These ships of Tarshish, these merchants of Tarshish,
Amen,
are
Phil.
moving westward to Spain, which discovered the so-called New World, right? And very fascinating history here.
Right.
And I think that the way that we have synthesized it, all three of us in all humility, is staggeringly brilliant.
Of course.
And
You are
humbly
a sinner.
admit.
And so
Absolutely.
that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing with the Canaanite. And
Yeah,
the
well, let's,
thing of it is,
like I was just going to say, just to underscore what you're saying, is that really is a mainstay of our thesis, is
Yes.
that America is the epitome in today's world of the merchants of Tarshish, of
Absolutely.
the Canaanites, of the Phoenicians. That's the empire that we mirror. And so, anyway, so we make that point very, very clear with your able help in the story, and Dean's as well, because we talk a lot about the dollar.
yes,
yes, what the dollar is, where it comes from. Dean, you might
the
just
pillars of Hercules.
yes, the pillars of
And the
Hercules.
S around the two. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, Dean,
And
you
by the way, that math that we came up with of the ancient coin of the Phoenicians with
Right.
the world on it, wasn't that something?
yes.
Well, this makes you want to go out and buy our book.
He's just jesting with us, I assure you.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So what this is an opening though, and we'll come back to Gog Magog in a second, but Dean, this is an opening for you to talk just a little bit about the economics, the origin of the dollar, and how that reinforces also the
And where it's going.
thesis of the
Yeah.
book. Yeah.
Well,
TK Maxx, big brands, small prices. Apps at TK
well, and then the ultimate destruction of the dollar, which we're seeing, because if there are too many, they're not going to be worth much. And,
That's true.
you know, I actually have a $100 million Zimbabwe dollar, $100 million dollar bill from Zimbabwe. So that's the worst case scenario, which is why we'll probably go to some kind of a Fed cryptocurrency. And once they do that, we're just one step away from the mark of the beast, because it's just they're in control of everything economic. And
You mean, Dean, I can't buy an oven in New York now? I can't buy a gas oven? Is that what you're
buy
trying to
an
tell me?
electric oven, and you can buy an electric car. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit just about that, about the destruction of the dollar. That has certainly, over the last 10 years, that has really been a major theme. You might talk, Dean, just a second about the BRICS and the threat that the BRICS are, because that's real current right now in terms of what the BRICS are trying to do vis-a-vis the dollar as the reserve currency.
Well, the BRIC nations are Brazil, Russia, China,
India.
And
India.
There's one more, isn't there?
South Africa.
South Africa. There you go. At any rate, I mean, they're so jealous of us because what we did, as we said, because we basically controlled the oil of the world, we made all of this dependent upon, you want to buy it, you buy it with dollars. You want to buy oil, you buy it with dollars. You want to buy a Ford, you buy it with dollars. You want to buy this, that, or the other thing. And so the dollar became the currency of the world, which gave us the power, because everybody had to change their currencies back into dollars. And but these up and coming nations, so to speak, the up and comers, are looking at it very jealously and saying, we got to break up this monopoly. This just isn't right. So we're going to, create our own reserve currency. China wants to create their own on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's all, everybody's kind of out, or the big guy on the block, everybody's out the upper pedestal.
Yeah, well, of course, Russia and Brazil are in a lot of turmoil. Brazil politically, right? So in terms of them actually being able to come together and force a new reserve currency, it doesn't seem likely, despite all the predictions of the death of the dollar. Is that your point of view?
Well, I think the dollar's going to do just fine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it will die. I mean,
okay, well, that means he's not very wise. This is 2 months ago, and BRICS has already been out by then. So if this guy thinks the American dollar's not going to fall, he's got the wrong info.
So far, we've been able to hold on, and these other countries don't have their trip together, so to speak. And so, India, China, they just don't. So once our energy industry is revitalized, and it wouldn't take too much to do it, because remember, we're the number one oil and natural gas producer in the world, and we're still sitting there in the sidelines, not using any of our resources.
All right.
We're buying this stuff for everybody else.
We're not talking about the strategic oil reserve.
Yeah, we still have the goods.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have no problem, dictating what's going to happen. But for some reason, there's a person that's trying to destroy, the country, and I can't imagine why.
I don't understand.
Somebody tried to
So-
destroy it.
Well, the point that I want to make sure that we make clear is that the dollar, which we conjecture the two lines through the S, that those are the pillars of Hercules, which of course
Yes.
is a
Well,
symbol
And what
of
could the
Iberian
S be?
Peninsula.
What could the S? Okay.
Yeah, Hispania, I don't know. But the dollar is the currency of the merchants of Tarshish. That is really where we were going with that. And
Yes.
lo and
exactly.
behold, what does the U.S. mint and what is the U.S. economy based on? The dollar. And
Yeah,
what is the world currency based on? The
The
dollar.
dollar, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And
It's going to be very difficult to get off that.
It's going to be hard to knock us off our pedestal in time. And what other country is Israel's only friend?
Mm,
Yeah.
that's right.
And again, that goes back to the Gog-Magog war.
Yes.
Because the ships, listen, the merchants and ships of Tarshish, which we have identified, are allied with Israel in the books of Ezekiel and of Daniel, and especially in Daniel. And well, both, okay. And oddly enough, the nations of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula are also in Gog-Magog, allied with the ships of Tarshish and with the beautiful land. And so that's already happened with the Abrahamic Accords,
Mhm.
Doug, and the fact that Saudi Arabia did not enter into that, but the United Arab Emirates did, and Bahrain and Qatar and Morocco and some of these other states, but especially those of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula.
Yes.
And because you have come down for a spoil. I remember when Wilbur talked about, hey, just take off the SB, and that's what they're after.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. And so, again, this Islamic Antichrist is a false flag, because it is apparent that the northern tier of nation states, where you've got Gog, and by the word, the name Magog simply means the allies of the principality known as Gog, okay, which appears at the beginning of the millenarian rule and reign at that final 7-week time frame, and at the end of the millennium. If I want to be a good dispensationalist, I have
Right.
to say that.
Yes. and
I
of
do
course
want to
that's-
say that emphatically.
Yeah.
and
that
so-
is-
Get your creds.
that- That's one of the arguments against Gog Magog being at the time of Christ's coming, because
Yes.
what is it, Revelation 20 or 21 that says that Gog and Magog arise again after the
Yes.
millennium and are finally
Yes.
down forever. So,
Right. That's a nice millenarian contestation,
Right,
and that's
right.
fine. That's fine.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
one of the things that I've argued, I want this to kind of feed back into the Gog Magog thing, is I've argued in a couple of books, The Next Great War in the Middle East, American Requiem, that America is identified as the daughter of Babylon,
Right.
of Jeremiah 50:51, and a few other verses. But the daughter of Babylon is, in my view, is distinctive from Mystery Babylon. I now believe Mystery Babylon represents apostasy.
Yes.
Represents apostasy of
Absolutely.
not just the Catholic Church, but
Right.
any Protestants that, like Episcopals, Methodist, Presbyterian.
We have plenty of our own.
that-
We
yeah,
have a
that-
lot of daughters.
I'm not naming any names now, But, yeah, but anyway,
It didn't say Baptist.
apostasy, you know, Dean, you like to talk about apostasy. There's a lot of that, isn't there?
Yep, there is.
Yep. And so I believe Mystery Babylon is that. I believe that the United States is the daughter of Babylon and is part of Babylon the Great. Now, the
Yes.
question that I raise, a view that I have put forth, which I believe is consistent with the late Grant Jeffrey, perhaps even with Arnold Fruchtenbaum, although I don't know for sure. But Grant Jeffrey, yeah, maybe Chuck Missler. But anyway, there's a view that the daughter of Babylon is taken out before the war of Gog and Magog. And
Well, there's some
Israel-
evidence to that
Yeah,
because the willful king does move his headquarters between the sea and the beautiful
Israel.
Yeah. So the headquarters is moved. His
Mhm.
tent
right.
is his tent is moved. His
So-
tabernacle is moved. Right.
Yeah. So the position that I've kind of have grown into over the last 10 years is that the United States is the daughter of Babylon. And I believe I've argued that really clearly and thoroughly in the books I've written during the last 10 years. And because it is, you might say, defanged, maybe not completely destroyed, but defanged. And it frees up the possibility for Israel to be attacked by these other nations because we are so much in turmoil that, we're
Well,
not.
do you, well, how do you see that, Doug? If I can ask you this question, I know
Mhm.
you're the moderator here, but
Yeah.
do you see the diminishing of the nexus of Babylon the Great, the daughter of Babylon, through civil strife within Babylon the Great, or through a nuclear exchange, or kind of a diminishing to the point where we are defanged, as you presented,
Right.
and then we have to move. The headquarters moves between. He'll set up his tabernacle in the beautiful land. So what do you see here?
Well, I speculate. I speculate that there is a nuclear attack on America. I'm not sure that America strikes back, but a number of cities in the United States, I believe, will be victims of nuclear attack from nations from the north, which is what it says in Jeremiah 51, and that will essentially take the United States sort of out of circulation, but it will not thoroughly destroy the United States military, because even if the aircraft carriers were taken out, there's still all these submarines, and most of those are going to survive this event. And so there still is the potential for perhaps even an American leader, or perhaps a king of England or someone like that, to in effect take control of the forces of the West, which could include, as I'm saying, a good chunk of the American military, sort of our capability. And that's
I actually am, Diane. I am a speed reader.
is rolled into, the willful king, if you will.
Very, that's plausible, very plausible. Actually, hate to say it, all the more to head for the Ozarks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what do you think? What do you think Chuck Missler moved to New Zealand? That's the way.
Did he move to New Zealand? Oh my God!
Yeah, he did. Oh yeah.
Because he believed there would be a nuclear war and the United States would be taken out. Anyway, so I'm putting forth, this idea. Unfortunately, I'm not happy about it, but it seems to me, based upon reading Jeremiah 50 and 51, that it's very clear that the daughter of Babylon is destroyed by powers from the north, shooting their missiles over the North Pole at the Western Giant. So that's my
it would appear. Yeah, it would appear though that's I've thought of that actually quite extensively, and I think you have a very credible argument, Doug. And I think that the current state of affairs now, Arnold Fruchtenbaum and others You saw that chart that came out of individuals who affirm Gog Magog will occur the first 40 days or at the beginning of the 70th week, and others before it, and
Right.
so forth. And so
I know
on.
I did a chart like that. I don't know who else has done one, but
Well, I think you're the only guy that did a chart.
yeah, I
I
did
took
that
your
in.
chart.
Yes, go
I
ahead.
took
You're
your chart
being a little facetious. I understand. Okay. Go right ahead. Say
But-
something
but
nice
I-
about me again.
but it was very impressive that the individuals that you had on that chart. I
Right.
mean, it would appear that Gog Magog conflagration of those northern Islamic states, southern Islamic states coming up against the willful king. Why would Islam come up against Islam, kind of a thing? That's why I don't affirm.
I can look at a page and pick out 2 or 3 words in like 2 seconds what the whole page is about. That's how you speed read. You don't read every word. You just look at the page and some words will jump out and it'll say what the whole page is about.
That the Antichrist is some Islamic
Right.
leader, Erdogan notwithstanding, and all that. But I don't
His health,
see.
all of a sudden, we've just heard is
Oh.
he's in very bad health. That's just something
no
that
kidding.
happened in the last day or two. Yes.
Oh wow, that's amazing. And yeah, I find that fascinating. And my one of my websites was hacked by the Aslan, the Lion of Islam, and I was
Oh.
hacked.
Oh wow.
But I survived to live and fight another day.
Yes. There you go. That's right. So
So what we're coming up against here, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is the final judgment of Babylon the Great. There are only 2 cities in the book of Revelation of any magnitude: New Jerusalem, the
mhm.
holy city, which should be us, you,
Yes,
and I, by the grace of
Amen.
God,
it is.
and Babylon the Great. Now, when I go to Nigeria to visit my brothers and sisters over there, I always ask the very poignant question, and that is, how many hallelujahs are mentioned in the New Testament? Now, Doug Woodward, I'm not going to embarrass you,
Right.
but there's only 4. And normally, when you see that word hallelujah or alleluia in Greek, it is mentioned. So when somebody cries out, well, hallelujah, you better know what context it is in the New Testament. And that is Babylon goes up in smoke and they all cry out, hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Wow, I never knew that. Hallelujah 4 times regards Babylon going to dust. Wow.
That's when you see the smoke will rise up and the merchants of the earth are judged in Revelation 18. And there's a big hallelujah that goes on. So every time you say hallelujah, brothers and sisters, you be thinking about that stuff is going to burn up along with all of our wood, hay, and stubble.
Yeah,
There you go.
I mean, it's well earned, isn't it?
Yes.
Well deserved. Well, now take us into this culmination of things in Revelation. Talk about the Armageddon campaign and kind of is it distinct from the Gog Magog war and so forth? Yeah, because that's really a distinctly dispensational point of view that we all still kind of hold to. And
Yes.
so if you would go in and explain that, that'd be awesome.
Well, the Armageddon campaign, that phrase was coined by Dwight Pentecost, who wrote the book, famous book on eschatology, Things to Come.
Things to come.
And
I remember
Things
that.
to Come. Just a great panoply of the covenants.
Hey, Mindy,
and
welcome to the channel.
the wars and so forth. But he called it the Armageddon campaign. And of course, you see that in Ezekiel 39, 17 through 20. And now, we always look at Ezekiel 38 and 39 and say, well, this is the Gog Magog war. It is up to a certain point. But from Ezekiel 39, 17 through 20, everything changes. And there is this description of another war that is going on besides the Gog Magog conflagration. And you see the Gog Magog war ending, and you see something new beginning. And of course, in Daniel chapter 11, after the king of the north and the king of the south are defeated by the willful king, it says that he will hear of rumors from the east and the north that will trouble him. I just love the King James Version. He hears the rumors and he's troubled, right? And then he says he will go out and annihilate many. And that is the campaign that White Pentecost is announcing. Pentecost did a much better job, I would have to say, than the beloved John Wolver. Just couldn't quite pinpoint.
He was
in
the
Daniel
president.
11.
But he was the president at Dallas Theological
Right.
Seminary, just so you know, and he was president during kind of our college days, I would say.
Yes, and he was a wonderful man of God. He and Dr. John Wolver and myself, along with many others, went to Washington, D.C. and held a major conference on affirming Israel as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy with Orthodox, conservative, and Reform and revisionist Jewish leadership in Washington, D.C. at the Hebrew National Congregation. We all signed a document to that effect called the Washington Declaration, and it was amazing.
You are
And,
old school, aren't you?
I'm old school. I'm into declarations and whatnot. But back in the day, that was in the 1980s, and we had a great time there with John Wolverd and Dr. Aldrich from Multnomah University now.
Multnomah.
And
Yes.
yeah, and they had, and you won't believe this, Doug, but John Wolverd was dancing with the Orthodox rabbis at an Orthodox synagogue. I saw this. And Dr. Aldrich looked at me while John Wolverd was dancing with the rabbis, and he said, they're never going to believe it. And I said, what do you mean, Dr. Aldrich? He said, imagine John Wolverd dancing with the prophets.
That's a sight that I can't
That's a
imagine.
history,
Really.
folks. You ain't going to get it anywhere else.
That's the truth. Yeah, you're just full of these anecdotes that are just.
I know, they're
fun.
nice little inserts in the
They're a
audience.
lot of fun. They really
Yeah.
are.
But anyway, Armageddon is this a culmination of battles that will ensue, and eventually he will come to his end. The emphasis is upon the Antichrist. And by the way, the Antichrist is not called the Antichrist until he is throughout the 70th week, the Antichrist. But in the middle of the week, as a good dispensationalist and affirming Brother Hal Lindsey's rendition of this, he receives a wound in the head and falsifies the resurrection, and from henceforth thereafter, he is entitled the Beast. So the Beast can no longer, because his spirit, his human spirit, is occupied, just as Satan entered into Judas Iscariot to commit the dastardly deed of betrayal. He was entitled the son of perdition by the Lord Jesus Christ himself.
Yes.
In John 17. Who is the son of perdition in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2? None other than the lawless one, the Antichrist, the beast. Okay? And so we have to take the scriptures and put them together as to why he's called the beast, as Nebuchadnezzar became the four-footed guy crawling around, his hair growing out, his fingernails growing out. And this is a beast. He was as a beast. A beast cannot fellowship with the eternal God. I mean, I love my dog, and I know Dean McGriff does. He loves his dogs and cats. There's the dog,
There's the
just
dog.
so you know, you can tell. All right, now, but that beast is not made to fellowship with the Almighty. I am, and so are you. And so a beast cannot fellowship with God, and neither can the Antichrist beast. He's been inhabited by Satan himself, as
All right.
far as the scripture is
All right,
concerned,
now-
and that's why he's the son of perdition.
That leads us to one of the fun exercises that we as dispensationalists like to engage in, and that is pinning the tail on the Antichrist. Who could possibly qualify If you
King
look at the
Charles.
world
We all
now,
know that.
you know, what persons, and there are two or three, could step up and step into this role of the beast.
I leave that to Dean.
That's a Dean question. What do you think?
No,
Let's get him in trouble.
not me.
This is
I know not the man. I don't know.
for YouTube. This is Dean McGriff. 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 So okay, so go ahead. What do you think about the leadership that's in the world right now, the power players, and if the Antichrist were to appear, let's say after some type of nuclear exchange, which I believe is imminent.
Out of all the world leaders, you've got to admit Biden's probably the weakest. Out of all the superpowers and semi-superpowers, he's probably the weakest of the lot.
As in within the next year or two, who might step up and play the role of or be the beast itself. All right, we're waiting.
Dean is speechless.
The only one that I always thought would just be the perfect candidate. Initials are BO.
Yes. Yeah,
Barry
I do too.
Obama.
I still,
Yeah.
you can't get over that, sort of 2 million people in front of the Berlin Gate that
Right.
he was speaking to, and the chills went up and down my spine when I heard about that.
He's kind of Islamic stuff.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah. So what do you think, Krieger?
Well, of course, I put my tail on several mercurial figures.
Mhm.
That is okay. Look, if even the very elect can be
The Antichrist and the beast are two separate things, Wyo.
deceived, what does that sound like? Okay, in other words, the elect could be deceived and get really close to being deceived, right?
Yeah.
But then it sounds like they kind of wake up at the last second almost. Oh my goodness, what have we done? Or, oh my word, we've been following a certain person, and now, alas.
There is another Islamic guy whose initials are RW.
Oh yeah, RW. Now you're wondering about what that is.
I'm trying to think about who that is. Well, how about did you guys ever read the book Having a Cup of Tea with the Antichrist?
Oh yeah, the Antichrist in the Teapot.
Yeah.
That was done by who was that done by? Down in Costa Rica or something.
It was done like 18 years ago. So, do you know what I'm referring to?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, as far as King Charles goes, that's a prospect.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Order of the Black Garter.
Yes, the Order of the Black Garter. And
That's really authentic.
And then also this peculiar thing about the throne of David and its whereabouts in the British Isles and so forth, and that during the coronation they sit on that very throne. I think you're aware of that.
Yes.
And they claim that throne is the throne of David that went through Ireland to Scotland and then it came down.
Yes, supposedly it's the rock that Jacob laid his head on.
Yes.
Dream of ascending and descending into heaven with the angels.
Yeah, right.
That's what it's supposed to be. It's actually supposed to be called by some the Holy Grail.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of credence to the Antichrist in the teapot phenomenon, actually. Very, very interesting, which leads me to believe that when I journey to England in September, those of you who are listening out there in video land should look for me at Honor Oak in London in September. I'll be speaking on some of these matters in southeastern London.
Oh wow, that's just fantastic. You have some great opportunities I don't want to say I'm envious of it because it involves a lot of travel, which I'm not real good at.
Yeah.
But golly, it sure is exciting to be able to talk to people about these things, and especially if you're addressing them from a long ways away.
Yeah, when we went to Africa, we have a school over there that we started called the Christ Ecclesia Institute, which brings together, we have folks from about 150 different ministries and denominations. It's a 2-year program bringing the body of Christ together. But while I was over there, just so the folks can know, I know that Nigeria is in great upheaval right now, financially and in so many other ways. And yet the desire among the Nigerians and so many Africans is the desire to reach out for the Lord in the midst of their suffering and poverty and abuse. And while I was there, I had the amazing opportunity of visiting perhaps the largest assembly of believers I have ever seen in my life under one roof. Now, folks are not going to believe this, but they can look it up. It's called the Redeemer Church of God, which is the largest ministry denominational affiliation in Nigeria. And they have outposts all over the world. And they have this one facility, Doug, that you're not going to believe. 4 miles long, 3 miles wide. And there were 12 million people in that assembly.
Good grief.
You have never in your life could believe or see such a incredible throng of believers. It was amazing. Absolutely. 12 million. And that is not, hey, the Rose Bowl seats 100,000. Figure, 120 times that.
Oh, yeah.
Can you fathom that?
Yeah. It's
hey, and my first question when I saw that crowd was, where's the bathroom? and you can't believe the roof system,
It's good to get your bearings.
Great. It's the most amazing place. It's a whole city. They have a whole city, hotels, banks, grocery stores, gas stations, everything, a whole city that houses this. And then this gigantic facility with giant screens and huge audio systems. It's a marvel of unbelievable proportion.
What a great, that's amazing. Well, listen, we're getting close to our time limit here. And so why don't we try to wrap this a little bit around the question, what comes next? In terms of events that would trigger the war of Gog and Magog, because I think we're sort of past the destruction of Damascus, and we're ready for the war of Gog and Magog. What would trigger that? What do you think?
Iran having the nuclear weapon, and Israel's not going to stand for it.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
And I would think they're going to probably use Damascus, Iran is, as a proxy to launch it. And that Israel will take out Damascus at that point. It will become an absolute ruinous heap. That will be the trigger.
Damascus is already a ruinous heap already.
Of Gog Magog.
Wow.
Now, I have said in my book, the signs in the heavens and on the earth.
Show us your book cover. Do you have it handy?
Well, I think I may have a cover of it here somewhere. But,
is this the one I wrote forward
this
to?
This is Doug Woodward's cover that got me into trouble. But anyway,
yes, I don't honor copyrights too well.
But I'll tell you what I said.
That copyrighted the Orion constellation, basically.
Yes, there you go. So you did that. But anyway, I had said in there that the date. I just love setting dates. Me
I
and
know.
what's his name? The guy Harold Camping.
Yes.
The 1994, then the year 2000 something, and then I went way the dodo and but I had calculated along with Bishop Usher. I know that your book on the Septuagint and so forth and so on would indicate that we've been around a lot longer than 6,000 years, and so forth.
Right.
But I had calculated that the creation of Adam was in 3,975 BC, and that the end of our 6-day, 6,000-year allotment by God Almighty would end in 2025. And that would commence, now that I understand it more clearly, the final 7 years, which would conclude in the first 3 months of 2033. And it's interesting to note that from 33 AD, which was, I believe, the Catholics are right on this, and some of the church fathers that in 33 AD, in the first 3 months of 33 AD, was the crucifixion of Christ, and that 2,000 years from the crucifixion, or from Pentecost, if you would, until 2033 would be 2 days or 2,000 years. It fits perfectly. And so I did not have that understanding when I determined that 2025 would be the commencement of the 70th week, the final week.
Okay, I'm surprised you went with that date, because we all know that Jesus was born probably 4 years before AD 0. So he was probably born in 4 BC, which takes his story up to 2027 or 2028. So he's on the wrong calendar there.
And then the 7-year time frame is so unique, so outside of the 6,000 years. It is during that great transition that the Almighty would affect all of those wars that would be ending until he would come and the wrath of God would be poured out. So, yeah, that is, I'm sticking with it.
Yeah.
And seeing what happened. And by the way, people say, well, no man knows the day or the hour. And you know how I feel about that phrase. Because it says in the days of Noah. It's not that they did not know that there wasn't going to be a flood. But the fact of the matter is that they were probably helping Noah build the boat, right? And they didn't want to know. But if the master of the house who was guarding the temple would have known when the thief, up on whether or not he's asleep or not, was going to come in his watch, he would have been prepared. And all of us need to be prepared for the thief. Jesus said just before Armageddon, he says that the thief is going to come and that you should watch in chapter 16 of the Revelation, which is great for pre-tribbers because the Armageddon happens at the beginning. I just thought I'd throw a bone for you, brother.
There is only one of us that represents that point of view. So, and he served today as your moderator. So, but yeah, but these guys and I have had a lot of fun, kind of in that debate about when the rapture occurs and so forth. And it's,
By the way, we're rooting for you.
Yes.
We're all in. We're all in for you to be spot on.
I know. That's so true. So, well, this has been, from my standpoint, it's been a fantastic time. And there's,
Okay, that one's over,
scratch
guys.
the surface of some of the issues.
Wherever you go in the world, one airline goes further to make it feel exceptional. Qatar Airways, going.
Hello, everyone. It's Doug Woodward. It is great to be with you. And I'm so pleased to be doing another edition of the Hot Seat. I have been setting things up. I have a number of interviews that I'll be doing over the next 3 or 4 weeks. And so I'll be publishing probably about one a week. So, make sure you got that little bell turned on so that when I post a show, you'll be notified. I'm up to almost 3,000 subscribers, which, I have done almost nothing in the last year to promote this show because of health issues, my own and my wife's. But a lot of that's kind of wrapped up. So I'm ready to get back in it. And of course, I'm working on writing. I'm always writing. And but I've got a great guest for you tonight, a good friend, someone that sort of stuck by me through thick and thin. And he's had me on his show so very many times. And his name is Derek Gilbert. Derek, welcome.
Doug, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad that you are here. I'm going to put the speaker, or rather the audio, on the speaker. So we'll see it that way. That'll be good. So you just got back from a trip to the Holy Land, yet another pilgrimage for you and Sharon. And this show isn't about, it's not a travel log, but I know that people would love to have just a couple of highlights, maybe something that was unusual that happened in this trip, and anything that would be encouraging to the folks. Love to hear about it. So tell us.
Well, we like to go places that are not on the beaten track, because we have always had a fascination with the weird and the and especially as it relates to the Bible. And since we wrote, just over the past 7 years, as we dug deeper into the culture around ancient Israel, the more we've come to realize that Israel was surrounded by a bunch of people who
Phil, God bless, mate.
the spirits of the dead, or what they thought were the spirits of their dead ancestors, the Amorites, the Canaanites,
You too, boy. God
the
bless.
Egyptians, the Hurrians to the north, who are the Horites of the Bible. All of them believed that the spirits of their ancestors still interacted with the living and had to be appeased, fed, given drink, their names remembered on a monthly basis, kings twice a month, because if you didn't, they ceased to exist in the afterlife, or they could come back and make your life really miserable. So we, in 2019, before the pandemic shut everything down, we had the opportunity to visit Gilgal Rephaim, which our friend Aaron Lipkin, who owns the tour company we partner with, calls Israel's Stonehenge. The thing is that Gilgal Rephaim is bigger, it is much older, and it is within eyesight of Mount Hermon, which is it's on the northern border of Israel. For people not familiar with it, it is where I think the best way to describe it quickly is that it was essentially the Canaanite version of Mount Olympus. It's where they believed their gods met. Their creator god El, who was the equivalent of Kronos in the Greek pantheon, held court there with Asherah, his wife, and their 70 sons. And that number 70 represented all of them. In other words, all the gods of the nations were the sons of El, and they all met on the summit of Mount Hermon. Well, but
adventure moves in trends, but one has stood the test of time. The Suzuki Vitara, with a $3,000 deposit bonus with Suzuki Financial Services. Vitara now.
About 30 miles south of there on the Golan Heights is this place called Gilgal Rephaim, which looks like, from above, it looks like a giant maze. It's concentric rings of stone. They estimate about 40,000 tons of stone compared to about 25,000 tons at Stonehenge that were put in place somewhere around 3,700 BC, and maybe even earlier. And we had the opportunity this time to meet with the archaeologist who did the most recent dig there, Dr. Michael Freakman. Pastor Doug Van Dorn went with us. He's the author of the book Giants, Sons of the Gods. He was the first one to spot the Serpent Mound of Bashan, a quarter of a mile north of there. And so we went there and spent basically a day with Dr. Freakman, and he gave us his theories on this location. But then the following day, we went to another site similar to Gilgal Rephaim, but only about a third as big. So instead of like 5 concentric rings, it's like 3 around a central tomb. But it's on the bank of the Jordan River, the east bank of the Jordan River, about 1.5 miles north of the Sea of Galilee. Dr. Freakman had written about it in one of his papers. I spotted it on Google Earth, so you could see it from space, basically. And it's about 0.5 mile from the place where Jesus called his first 3 disciples, Andrew, Peter, and Philip. And so when we started putting this together with geographic clues in the Bible, John chapter 1 in particular, where John is confronted by scribes and Levites who were sent by the Pharisees in Jerusalem to find out who is this guy John and why are so many people flocking to him. John 1 verse 28 says, these things happened in Bethany across the Jordan, meaning east of the Jordan River, where John was baptizing. Now, for 2,000 years, people have been trying to find Bethany east of the Jordan River because there is no place named Bethany east of the Jordan River. The only place anywhere in Israel named Bethany is the one on the Mount of Olives, which is just across the valley from the Temple Mount. So where is it? Well, Origen, the early church father, early church theologian, wrote in the early 3rd century that even though the oldest and best Greek manuscripts read Bethania, translated Bethany, that couldn't be right because there is no place named Bethany. It must be Beth Abara, and that's why our King James translation reads Beth Abara. Origen changed it because he couldn't find the place. But in 1877, a scholar and an explorer for the Palestine Exploration Fund, Lieutenant Claude Condor, who was a friend of Sir Charles Warren, who found the Moabite stone, the Mesha stela, and Warren's shaft, how Joab, David's general, got up into Jerusalem. Condor, his friend, tried to find it. And he said, you know, it strikes me that Bethania, being the original text, is probably a transliteration of the 1st century Roman name, Botania, which was what the Romans called Bashan. Bashan across the Jordan. That is the land north and east of the Sea of Galilee. That was the kingdom of Og of Bashan 3,500 years ago, the first military target of Moses and the Israelites. And it is so covered, Doug, with dolmens, which are these giant megalithic structures, monuments for the dead. They look like tables, the simplest form, like a trilithon, 2 vertical slabs with a tabletop across the top. In fact, that's what the word means. Dolmen is from the Brittonic language. It means table. That the Israeli archaeologists have concluded that ancient Bashan, the Golan Heights, is essentially one giant dolmen field. So the 30 miles from the Sea of Galilee to Mount Hermon, east across the border into what is now Syria, just covered with these monuments to the dead. And on the bank of the Jordan River, the east side of the Jordan River, meaning it's across the Jordan, you've got this megalithic structure like Gilgal Rephaim, which Dr. Michael Friedman concludes was probably used in rituals for the dead. So considering that is across the Jordan, and that's half a mile from the hometown of Peter, Andrew, and Philip, we think we have found, well, 2 things. Number one, the actual historic location of the baptismal site of Jesus, which is not near Jericho, as the United Nations thinks. It is not at Yardenit, which nobody really believes, but it's a tourist site south of the Sea of Galilee. But we also believe that we've located the physical location of the Valley of the Shadow of Death. Because in Matthew 4,
Wow, there's literally a place, the Valley of Death. I thought that was metaphysical, like spiritual.
read that when Jesus moved to Capernaum, which is on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee, about a mile from Bethsaida, it was to fulfill that which was written by the prophet Isaiah in Isaiah chapter 9. That's the prophecy, the messianic prophecy. Unto us a son is born, unto us the child is given.
Yes.
Yeah, well, Jesus moves to this area at the south end of a valley through which the Jordan River runs between Mount Hermon and the Sea of Galilee. And Matthew says this fulfilled what was written by the prophet Isaiah. The people dwelling in darkness have seen a great light. The people dwelling in the region and shadow of death, on them a light has dawned. Wow. Well, and then we go back to Psalm 23, which is about the valley of the shadow of death. Remember, there's a line in that psalm.
Hey, Johnny, good night, mate. God bless.
Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies.
A dolmen?
Yeah, we think so. Sharon gave a presentation on this several years ago in Nashville, and like 300 people in this church all went, oh,
yes, really?
Moment. Yeah, but it wasn't until this year that we kind of put the pieces together with the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of John, the Psalms 22 and 23. Remember, Psalm 22 is the one that says, bulls of Bashan surround me, the messianic prophecy of Jesus on the cross. And then the 23rd Psalm, which leads it was basically, yea, though you lead me through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil.
Mhm.
Thy rod and thy staff, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. You put the pieces together, you think, okay, that's where Jesus was baptized.
Mhm.
He's led into the wilderness, which is not the desert of Judea down near Qumran. It's the wilderness of Bashan, this ancient region devoted to the cult of the dead. And then he's taken up a very high mountain where Satan shows him the kingdoms of the world and tempts him. That can only be Mount Hermon.
True.
Yeah, and then and then 3 years later he goes to Mount Hermon to Caesarea Philippi, and for Peter's confession, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Oh yeah, and on this rock, this 9,200-foot mountain, the Canaanite Mount Olympus, I will build my church, and the gates of hell, which is the grotto of Pan, this big cave right over here, will not prevail against it. And then he climbs the mountain for the transfiguration.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that when we begin to understand the religious and the cultural context and the geography,
Right.
it all makes sense. So yeah, I know that there are, in fact, there's a good friend of ours who's an archaeologist, recently published a paper defending the site near Jericho as the actual baptismal site of Jesus. And it's like, well,
maybe not.
I don't have the training or the letters behind my name, but I think it's pretty clear when you read in John chapter 1 that these things happen in Bethany across the Jordan. The next day Jesus appears. The next day again, two of John's disciples, one of whom is Andrew, sees Jesus and begins following him.
Yeah.
Andrew and Peter were partners in a fishing business with James and John on the Sea of Galilee. That's 90 miles from the UN site. So
wow.
Back in the day, that would take a week to walk there. So it's not likely Andrew was discipling John the Baptist if John was baptizing 90 miles from his boat.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, yeah, that was the thing that we thought was just amazing stuff.
Well, tremendous. And yeah, you do kind of go off the beaten path and find things that are truly fascinating. And you're making some connections there that I've certainly never heard before. And that's fantastic. So really pleased to have you kind of recount those things. And it's so perfect because so much of what you've written about in your book on the return, the second coming of Saturn, so much of what you've written about, you sort of introduced that into the lingo that you just shared with us. There's so much there. So the material in the book is a bit challenging because there's so many names. But I ask you to perhaps give us the central thesis of the book, which is really surprising, and we will be discussing it.
At Imran Khan Cancer Appeal, people are given world-class, life-saving cancer treatment for free. Your sponsorship.
I argue in the second coming of Saturn that there is an entity who rebelled after the fall in the Garden of Eden. The leader of the Genesis 6 rebellion described in Genesis 6 verses 1 through 4, called Shemiyaza by the Hebrews, known by many other names throughout history. And I kind of trace them chronologically through the book. He was called Kumarbi by the Hurrians, the Horites of the Bible. He was called Enlil by the Akkadians and the Sumerians, called El by the Amorites and the Canaanites, Dagon by the Amorites and the Philistines, Ashur by the Assyrians. He was called Milcom by the Ammonites and called the abomination of the Ammonites in 1 Kings. And then it becomes clear when you read 1 Kings and 2 Kings that Milcom is the same as Molech. So this entity, Shemiyaza, I argue, is Molech of the Bible. But continuing on further into history, he's Kronos of the Greeks, Saturn of the Romans, Baal Haman of the Phoenicians, and I argue that he will return for 5 months at the very end of the age as Apollyon or Abaddon, the destroyer.
All right. Why don't you, and that's fantastic, why don't you talk for just a few minutes about the origins of some of these gods? Obviously, if I pronounce it correctly, Shemiyaza, is that correct?
Shemiyaza. At least that's
Shemiyaza, yes. Okay, and obviously he's the central figure in the story you're weaving. But give us some of the history, a little bit, the names you just went through, kind of go ahead and take a little bit longer, trace the sort of the evolution and the geographical migration, if you would, of some of these concepts.
Shemyaza was described in the book of First Enoch as the chief of the watchers who rebelled. First Enoch gives us kind of an expanded version of the 4 verses in Genesis chapter 6, where the creation of these monstrous hybrids called the Nephilim, the giants, are discussed. He and another character, Azael or Azazel, kind of emerge in First Enoch as the 2 ringleaders. Shemyaza appears to be the one who led his 200 colleagues into the corruption of the human bloodline by taking human wives and propagating children. Azael taught humanity how to make weapons and instruments of war, how to work metal and things like that. In other words, he taught forbidden knowledge.
Right.
So he's almost like a Prometheus character. Prometheus who stole fire from Olympus.
That's exactly Prometheus's character. Good pickup, Derek. Wow.
Was punished by Zeus. Anyway, First Enoch describes how the entities were punished, sent to the netherworld. That is confirmed, although they're not named in 2 Peter 2 and Jude verses 6 and 7. But when you read 2 Peter 2 in context, Jude 6 and 7 and the verses following, it's clear that the angels who sinned that they're describing committed a sexual sin. And the only place in the Bible we see anything like that is in Genesis chapter 6. So I argue that this Shemyaza character is to be equated with the angels who sinned, referenced by Peter and Jude. Interestingly, we find that in Mesopotamian religion, a group of supernatural wise men called Apkallu likewise were responsible for bringing the gifts of civilization to humanity. They came from the Abzu, which is the Sumerian word from which we get the word abyss. So they came from the abyss with the gifts of civilization. And in one of the Babylonian texts, the chief god Marduk says that at some point in the past, he got angry and a flood swept over and he banished the craftsmen, the Apkallu, to the Abzu and told them never to return. So in the Babylonian myth, we've got this story of these supernatural entities who brought these brought this knowledge to humanity and were punished by being sent to the netherworld. And then you come to the Greek and Roman religion, where you've got a group of older gods or elder gods, if you will, called the Titans, who were overthrown when Zeus was born and raised in secret because Kronos had been eating his children as they were born. To try to head off a prophecy that one day his children would overthrow him. Zeus was smuggled away by his mother, raised in secret. He returned, managed to get Kronos to vomit up his siblings, and they led a rebellion and banished the Titans to Tartarus, which is a level below Hades.
Right.
And in fact, the connection there there's actually a connection there to 2 Peter 2, because in 2 Peter, the apostle writes that God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but cast them down to, and the Greek word literally is Tartarus. He didn't send them down to the abyss or to Hades. He sent them to Tartarus, connecting this story to the story of the Titans of the Greeks. And if we accept as Christians that Peter was writing under the influence of the Holy Spirit, we have to accept that he was inspired to. It's the only place in the New Testament that word is used. And as our friend, the late Dr. Michael Heiser would say, if it's in the Bible and it's weird, it's probably important.
It's probably important.
Yeah. So,
well, there's
good evidence there to connect.
That's a pretty good line. If it's in the Bible and it's weird, it's probably important. That's a good pickup.
Story to the story of the sinful angels from Genesis 6. So the Titans of the Greeks, the Apkallu of the Mesopotamians, were the sons of God from Genesis chapter 6.
Absolutely. Yes. Now, I was going to make one comment. In the creedal Christian faith, more like the Presbyterians, the Episcopals, and so forth, the Apostles' Creed is repeated usually in the worship service, and there is a line in there that Jesus was crucified, dead, and buried.
He descended into hell.
But he descended into hell. And that, of course, that line has been stricken from most of the modern hymn books, like the Methodist that I grew up with, unfortunately, cough, cough. And you go, what's that about? He went to hell? Why did he go to hell? It's Jesus.
Yeah, but that's not actually what the Bible says.
Right.
In 1 Peter 3, beginning at verse 18, we read that for Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in the spirit, he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, because they formerly did not obey when God's patience waited in the days of Noah. Now, the Greek word translated spirits there, pneumasin, does not, in the New Testament, it never refers to human spirits unless it is qualified as such, and it is not here. So what has happened here is Jesus has descended into the abyss, probably. We don't know, because Peter says he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. But the spirits in prison that he refers to in 2 Peter 2, the spirits that Jude refers to in verses 6 and 7, are those sinful angels.
Right.
And again, if we're putting the evidence together here, saying, okay, they're in Tartarus in 2 Peter 2, verse 4. So this is who Jesus went to see, the titans of Greek mythology, the Apollo of the Mesopotamians, the sons of God from Genesis 6. Jesus went down and essentially proclaimed his victory over these entities. This is not, as the Roman Catholics would call it, the harrowing of hell, where he went and basically told human spirits in Hades that they'd be getting out. Jesus went.
I didn't know that's what the Catholics teach. Wow. Wow.
And he declared victory over these spirits in Tartarus, a separate place from Hades, Sheol, a place reserved for these supernatural rebels. And boy, we found it, like I said, over the last 7 years, as we put these pieces together, this cult of the dead and this idea of resurrection, or of trying to maintain the spirits of the dead ancestors in the afterlife, is a constant in all of the cultures around ancient Israel, from Persia to Rome. This idea was part of everyday life. The dead were never departed from you. They were always with you, and you had to perform all of these rituals to keep the family spirits, the ancestral dead, happy and alive in the afterlife. And they sort of represented like a middle tier in the spirit realm between us, the living, and the great gods way up above. Jesus basically going down into declare victory over the spirits in prison, basically saying, look, at dawn, and again, credit to Mike Heiser for this, at dawn of the third day, I'm getting out, but you, and I would add, and your hybrid offspring are still dead.
Absolutely. All right. Well, all right. So let's jump up and kind of more broadly in terms of kind of where you're going. I think there's one term that you haven't said yet that I think you have to explain, and that is the Raphaim. What's the difference between the Raphaim and the Nephilim, or Nephilim, the average? Well, depending upon how you say it.
I think the Rephaim and the Nephilim are essentially different names for the same entities.
Okay.
The Nephilim were the giants when they walked on the earth, and later they became, and Nephilim, usually the etymology is explained by Bible teachers as deriving from the Hebrew verb nephal, which means to fall. So the fallen ones. And that is accurate insofar as it goes. But Mike Heiser, to bring him in again, showed, I think, rather convincingly that there is a loan word from Aramaic, naphilah, that literally means giant. And so when you Hebrewize the plural form, because the Hebrew, or rather the plural form of a noun in Aramaic is in, so it'd be Nephilim. But in Hebrew, if you Hebrewize it, as it were, it becomes Nephilim, literally the giants. So the word Nephilim literally does mean the giants. In fact, that word in Aramaic, naphilah, is their term, or was their term in ancient days, for the constellation Orion, the giant. So the Rephaim, that is a word that probably derives from an ancient Akkadian word that roughly means to be large or great. So the Rephaim would literally be the great ones or the mighty ones. Dr.
Is it-
Jed Burton.
I was going to ask, is it not the case that I'm thinking the term Nephilim is not used much? Is it used anything beyond Genesis 6:4? Used one other time? Same passage?
Numbers 13:33.
Yes, 13:33.
Spies, right. Spies return from scouting out Canaan, and they bring back an evil report
Right.
and say that
Right.
the Anakim are there and they come from the Nephilim. So,
Yeah, so the point I was going to make, thank you for clarifying that, is the word Rephaim is used in many cases
right.
throughout the Old Testament. So what's the difference? So there must be some difference if the word is chosen in most of the cases where we're referring to these great ones that are dead. All right, so explain that if you will.
I think the difference is that the Nephilim was the term applied to them when they walked the earth, and that the Rephaim is the term that applies to them after death. Now we know that there were tribes that were counted as Rephaim in the time of Moses. The Emim, the Zamzumim, the Anakim were counted as Rephaim. I think that, and this is the direction Sharon and I have taken in our research. We have no problem believing that there were giants who walked the earth in long ago. Right. Certainly in the pre-flood era, the Bible's very clear on that. Less clear in the post-flood period, and I know there are people who study the Nephilim and the Rephaim and argue over the second incursion theory. Were there other angels who sinned and came down and commingled with human?
I'm on a journey to discover the human story of gold, how it shapes us.
We can't prove that until the day that we can actually, national treasure style, bust into the Smithsonian and expose the bones to the world. We're focusing on the things that we can show, and we can show from texts that have been discovered within the last 100 years that there was a cult that venerated these spirits, literally called Rephaim or Raphaima by the Amorite neighbors of the Israelites. And we can show that these texts actually have some crossover with the Bible. Some of the terms used for these Rephaim show up in very surprising places in the Old Testament. So I think in a nutshell, though, the Nephilim, the term used for these giants when they walked the earth, Rephaim, the term applied to them, to their spirits after death, and also to the tribes that worshipped them, I believe. That's the direction we took with our book, Veneration. It is clear that the Rephaim were believed to be supernatural entities that could affect the natural realm. And so there were sacrifices that were made to them at the Amorite city of Ugarit, which is in northern Syria on the Mediterranean coast. But about 25 years ago, a scholar named Amar Anus published a paper titled "Were There Greek Rephaim?" And he showed that a term used in some of these Ugaritic texts applied to a legendary king from long ago named Daniel. By the way, I guess that was a popular name back in the ancient Near East. Daniel was called by a term that he showed was the origin of the term used by the Greek poets Homer and Hesiod for the demigods who lived in the days when Kronos ruled in heaven. So the demigods like Heracles and Perseus were the term Meropes anthropoi in the Greek. That word Meropes derives from the same Semitic root from which we get Rephaim. So yeah, I mean, it's like, okay.
Well, this story clearly,
a scholar.
I was going to say this story of giants, Rephaim, and so forth. It's not just in a few passages in the scripture. It's clearly something that is very broad in the Bible in terms of the scope of this, and that's really mind blowing. But I have to say, after reading your book, and I'm about halfway through Doug Van Dorn's book, that's like the amazing insight that you come away with is like, this story about the giants in Genesis 6:4, you think it's just sort of one little thing and maybe kind of explains the flood, but no, it's like it's woven in the tapestry of scripture almost throughout the scripture.
It really is.
Yeah, and so you might comment on that.
The word Rephaim is once you get past the time of Joshua and his victory over the Anakim in Canaan, and it's pretty clear when you read at the end of Joshua. I believe it's chapter 11. I'd have to look, but there's a summary there that describes, Joshua had basically eliminated the Anakim from the hill country of Judah, the hill country of Israel, only in Ashdod, Gath, and the other Philistine city, Ashdod, Gath, and I'm forgetting the third one. But anyway, that's relevant because Ashkelon. I think so.
I think so.
400 years after Joshua, David and his men have to, take out Goliath and his buddies.
Right.
But there are many other references to Rephaim in the Old Testament. It's usually we miss it because usually it's translated as the dead, the departed, the shades, something like that. For example, there is a section of Isaiah chapter 19, which I argue is end times prophecy. I'm sorry, Isaiah 26 rather, that I argue is end times prophecy and a prophecy of the destruction of the Rephaim. Beginning at verse 13 in Isaiah 26, we read, "O Yahweh our God, O Lord our God, other lords besides you have ruled over us, but your name alone we bring to remembrance." And this is, by the way, Doug, a slap at the cult of the dead, because as part of the monthly veneration of the ancestral dead, the ritual performed by the Amorites every month on the 30th of the month, because that was a night of no moon on a 30-day lunar calendar, they would have to summon the ancestors by calling their names.
Wow.
And then they would have a ritual meal and pour out a drink offering to keep the ancestors alive in the afterlife. But here Isaiah is saying, other lords ruled over us, but your name alone we bring to remembrance. The others are going to be forgotten and fade away to nothing. Verse 14, they are dead, they will not live. They are Rephaim, they will not arise. To that end, you have visited them with destruction and wiped out all remembrance of them. Again, another slap at this cult of the dead. And then in verse 19, Isaiah,
if you are a Rephaim, you have no chance to be resurrected.
That is correct. And I think Ezekiel prophesies that as well at the Ezekiel 39, the war of Gog and Magog. But in verse 19 of Isaiah 26, he writes, your dead shall live. This is a prophecy of the resurrection of the faithful, a prophecy of resurrection in the Old Testament. Your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise. You who dwell in the dust, awake and sing for joy, for your dew is a dew of light. And now this last sentence here, I think, was badly translated in most of our English Bibles. The ESV reads, the earth will give birth to the dead. The earth will give birth to the Rephaim. That seems to contradict verse 13 and 14 above. But the word translated give birth, ironically enough, is that Hebrew verb nephal that scholars think is the root behind the word Nephilim.
It's mistranslated.
When you do a search through the Old Testament using Bible software, because I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but I know how to use the search engine, you find that every other place that verb is used, nephal, it means exactly that, to fall, has fallen, fall down, will fall, has fallen. Suddenly here, in one verse, they translated give birth, because I don't think they knew what to make of it. It's only been the last 40 years or so that scholars have realized that there was this cult of the dead around ancient Israel. The better translation here, and this is the way it's translated in the Septuagint, which is, in your course,
which of course probably means it's right. But go ahead.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. The land of the impious, or the land of the ungodly, will fall. Or if we take the Masoretic reading, but just translate that verb nephal correctly, the land of the Rephaim will fall.
Yeah.
And scholars have different. This said, this can only refer to Tartarus in the land of the Titans, the sons of God from Genesis chapter 6. So in Isaiah here, you got a prophecy that we, the faithful, will be resurrected, but not the Rephaim, and certainly not their progenitors, not their parents.
Right. Absolutely. Man, it's amazing stuff. All right. So let me push back on one element. This is the hot seat. All right. So the after flood, the incursion, where did the giants come from? You already mentioned Numbers 13:33. We know about Og. We know that the Israelites came back with, the 10 of the 12 came back with a bad report because they saw the giants in the land, and they said, we are as grasshoppers, and they see us as grasshoppers.
Mhm.
So clearly there were giants, and that was really one of the primary objectives of Joshua's conquering of Canaan, was to wipe out the giants. Now, he didn't get the job completely done. That's why this guy named Goliath pops up, and he and his brothers, and they also are giants. They're perhaps 10 feet tall.
Well, let me tackle this here because I think I can answer this.
Okay.
First of all, we don't know that Og was 9 cubits or 13 feet tall.
Okay.
His bed was 4 cubits by 9 cubits. But that just happens to match exactly, and we know this from an inscription found at the site of ancient Babylon, that matches exactly the dimensions of the cultic bed in the temple of Marduk, where it was believed that Marduk, on the New Year celebration called the Akitu Festival, would have ritual sex with his consort, Zarpanatu, to bless the land for the coming year. And this was, scholars debate whether the king stood in for Marduk, and there was a Hierodule, a temple priestess who would stand in for Zarpanatu. But the point I think that Moses is making is that the bed of Og was echoing, because Og was an Amorite, and the kingdom of Babylon was founded by Amorites. Hammurabi the Great was an Amorite. There is no ethnicity, was no ethnicity called Babylonian.
Right.
It'd be like saying I am a Chicagoite because I was born there. No, sorry, I'm German, English, Swedish, Welsh, and other things. So I think what Moses was doing was connecting Og to the occult wickedness of the kingdom of the Amorites based in Babylon by connecting that the size of his bed. Now, was he of unusual size? We don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us, just mentions the size of his bed, but I don't think it's coincidental that it was the same size as the cult bed in the temple of Marduk.
That's a great point. Now, how about Goliath?
Goliath. Well, Doug, in the Septuagint, as you know, Goliath was mentioned as being 4 cubits in the span rather than 6 cubits in the span. So he was 6'9" rather than 9'9". Now, that is still really, really big. I looked this up. The average Israelite in the time of Goliath, around 1000 BC, was about 5'4".
Yeah, that makes sense.
So he was still really, really large. But I think the clue here is, again, in what kind of occult practices they were engaging in, more so than whether or not they were literal blood descendants. We see in 2 Samuel 21, beginning at verse 15, where it describes a war with the Philistines, and David went with his servants and fought with the Philistines. And David grew weary, and Ishbi-Benob, a really bizarre name. This is 2 Samuel 21:16. One of the descendants of the giants. That phrase translated there, and we see another named Sibbecai the Hushathite struck down Saph, who was one of the descendants of the giants. Same phrase in Hebrew. It's Yeladeh Ha-Rapha. And the Ha is the Hebrew definite article the, so descendant of the, but Rapha is a singular form. Descendant of the Rapha, or perhaps descendant of the giant. Rapha is the singular form of Rephaim. But Yeladeh does not mean blood descendant. It does not mean a genetic inheritor of whatever DNA the Nephilim in the pre-flood era had. The word Yeladeh actually means one who is a member of a group into which one is initiated or consecrated. In other words, this was probably a warrior cult who venerated or worshipped the Rephaim. And I think the clue is in the name of this guy, Ishbi-Benob, which actually should be pronounced Ishvi-Ben-Ov. And that second part of his name should be split. Ben-Ov, meaning son of the Ov. And in Hebrew, Ov means medium, or at least that's how it's translated into English. A scholar back in 1966, Harry Hafner, who was a Hittiteologist, showed that the word Ov in Hebrew derives from a Hurrian word. Archaeological joke here. The Hurrians, not to be confused with the Russians. The Hurrians are the Horites of the Bible. The Hurrians had a a sacred area that they call the Abi, A-B-I. This was a ritual pit that they dug into the earth.
Oh,
And
yes.
they used it to summon spirits.
I
from
wanted
the
you to explain about the ritual pit. I found that fascinating.
And I wouldn't have found it if Sharon hadn't pointed me to the research of husband and wife archaeologists, Giorgio and Marilyn Kelly Bucciolati, who spent years digging at a site in northern Syria. Sadly, they've not been able to get back there since 2011 because of the civil war.
Yeah.
They found the ancient Hurrian city of Urkesh, which was known from other texts in the Middle East. I suggest in the book that Urkesh might be Ur-Kasdim, or Ur of the Chaldees,
right,
hometown of Abraham.
Yeah.
That's speculation, don't know. Certainly, I think Abraham is from northern Mesopotamia, not from Iraq. It's southern Iraq. But
right.
Anyway, at this site,
we agree on that. Go ahead.
Excellent. At this site, Urkesh, they found the temple, and next to the temple, this ritual pit that went down, they estimate, about 40 feet. And they could only go down about halfway because they were concerned about the stability of the walls. But this dates back to the middle of the 4th millennium BC. So 3500 BC, they were digging this ritual pit to summon spirits from the netherworld, the Abi. And again, that's where not only the Hebrews get the word Ov from there, the Sumerians, he argued, got the word Abzu from the Hurrians.
Right. Okay.
And Abzu, again, is where we get the word abyss.
Right.
So
this is a very fresh water, though, as I remember.
Right.
Right. But it is abyss, yes.
And when we remember the story of King Saul going to the medium of Endor, or the Ov of Endor, the night before he dies in battle with the Philistines, Samuel's spirit comes up from the earth. Why? Because she's using a ritual pit. She dug a hole, sacrificed something, and then God surprised her by allowing the spirit of Samuel to return. But this is a practice that we can trace back through the Hurrians to at least 3500 BC. And then because they use a really unique style of pottery that archaeologists have been able to trace, it distinguishes their culture from the other cultures around them. We can trace the origin of the Hurrians to the plain of Ararat, which is the plain below the mountains where Noah's Ark came to rest. Sometime around 4500 or 4000 BC, they began to spread out and brought their occult practices with them. And they wound up in the Holy Land, where not only were they teaching the Israelites, apparently, how to summon spirits from the netherworld, but they were in control of some very important places. Like I argue in the book that the Jebusites, who David took Jerusalem away from, were actually Hurrians. And the evidence is that when David bought the threshing floor of Araunah, that name, Araunah, is not a proper name. It is a Hurrian word that means Lord or King. It is a title. So, and you got the Hurrians at Hebron, Talmai and Sheshai. Those are Hurrian names. And we read in the War of Nine Kings, where the kings came from Mesopotamia in the days of Abram and Lot, and they did battle with the Horites in the wilderness of Paran. That's down near Mount Sinai.
Diane, I saw something else
they were
about
all
that.
over the Holy Land, and their influence, spiritually speaking, in terms
I saw something else about the bugs they're going to try and push us to eat.
of trying to communicate with these spirits of the netherworld, is all through the Old Testament.
Now, the Hurrians are not the Hittites. Is that true?
Correct.
Okay.
Their texts were preserved by the Hittites, which is why we know so much about the Hurrians. The Hittites were sort of like, they tried to absorb the gods of all of their surrounding nations. It's like, in fact, there's some texts that almost read like travel brochures, for the spirit realm. Hey, come to the land of the Hittites. We are the best sacrifices. Right. So they preserved those Hurrian texts. The Hurrians were very important in the ancient world from about 3500 BC down to about the time of the Exodus, around 1400 BC. The last major Hurrian kingdom was called Mitanni, and it was essentially in the region occupied by the Kurds today. There's some who think that the Kurds may be descendants of the Hurrians.
Right.
But northern Iraq, southern Turkey, northern Syria, that was kind of the home country of the Hurrians. And again, it was from that area that Abraham came when he went to the Holy Land, and he encountered other Hurrians there, as did, going down another 800 years, so did David.
Right. Now, one of the issues that I have with your thesis, which I find fascinating, and I'm eager for you to tell us more about why you think this, but clearly the the centrality of the Satan, the adversary, it does that's lost in your book. In other words, you are really focused on Shemiyazu. I need to see the word in front of me. I could pronounce it better. And you're focused on him and his influence, even from the pit. And so help us understand, what's the context? Where does Satan, Lucifer, the dragon, where does he fit in to this story?
To be clear, I argue in the book that Lucifer is not Satan, it is Shemiyaza. I think the rebel described in Isaiah chapter 14 is Shemiyaza and Ezekiel 28.
Does that mean that you don't believe there is a different personality that's represented by the term Satan or by the devil, the dragon, of Revelation?
Oh, no. I think they're two separate entities. I think what we're looking at here is a rebellion that's much bigger than just Satan and some minions.
Okay.
I think I'm okay with the idea that the rebel in the garden in Genesis chapter 3 is Satan. The Nakash, the serpent in Genesis 3, I believe. I believe that's Satan. Genesis 6, you've got a different rebellion led by Shemiyaza and Azazel.
Yes.
And, I've kicked this around with friends Sharon and I. We have really weird conversations here at home.
Yeah, I'd like to just listen in sometime.
It is a blessing to be married to somebody who gets you and really finds this stuff really interesting.
Yes, it is.
But we've also talked to people like Timothy Galvarino, L.A. Marzulli about this and speculated what role would Satan have played in the Genesis 6 rebellion? Because when you look at Satan in the Old Testament, there is no connection. And I think we also need to throw...
Actually, Diane, that's where I saw it on Redacted about the bugs.
This out there, which blew my mind because I only learned this, within the last year. I knew that in the old...
Guys, I might finish off with this.
Welcome to the Prophecy Club. I'm going to call this King Donald 2024. And this is going to be really, really important. I mean, I'm having to get pretty close to saying that, yes, we are in the tribulation with all these things that are coming to pass. Big things, big things. Today is Israel. So, I mean, it's really big things. Like, I've been waiting for years for it. Okay, yes, click subscribe, bell, share with your friends. Bible study Friday night, and you can read the rest of it. Also, we're asking everybody to join the Prophecy Club. $9.90 automatic gift monthly. So if God has blessed you, we can certainly use your help, and you just click right there. I'm going to start with another disclaimer. I'm not setting any dates. I'm just guessing. I'm being a good watchman like you. We got lots of stuff to cover, so I'm going to keep moving. This comes to us from Rock Island Books. C.J. Lubbock came up with this, and I do not know for certain it's correct, but it sounds correct. He has set the date of crucifixion, meaning he says Jesus was crucified on the 14th day of Nisan in 30 AD, right over here, okay?
Yep.
70 years later,
yep, that's about right.
Nisan, destruction of Jerusalem. So that puts Jesus...
Because remember, Jesus was really born around 3 or 4 BC.
His death at 30 AD. And I know that on the Feast of Unleavened Bread stopped the prophetic count, and then it actually stopped on first fruits. It starts again on first fruits at some point in the future. I'll say it that way. So if we take 30 AD, add 2,000 years, that would mean that Jesus would return in 2030. No, I'm not saying Jesus is going to return in 2030, because there's some other good reasons why I think it might be 2029. But the point is, it's still saying it's really, really close. Also, I talked about this yesterday, a brief reminder, because it's going to fit in. Dmitry Duduman was told the fall of America will start with an internal revolution in America started by the communists. He was told that in 1984.
If you add 40 years to that, that comes up to 2024. If you add 7 years to that, you see we're still in the ballpark, 2029, 2030, when Jesus would return, if 2024 were the start of the tribulation. Again, I don't know exactly, but I do know we're really, really close. Also covered this yesterday. So we believe that, according to reports, a hurricane that hit America just here recently in California was probably fulfilling Shane Warren's prophecy that a hurricane would hit America, then the dollar would be blowing worthless as leaves, and what would start it would be two countries selling oil in some currency other than the dollar, and that has started. He also saw signs that says we want our entitlements and gold-backed bricks go into effect January 1, 2024, which is probably going to start that. That's associated with the New Madrid earthquake. Now, I covered all of this yesterday. I'm not going to read all through this. If you missed that program yesterday, you really want to go back and watch it. But what I'm saying is there's a good possibility. I don't know for sure. I'm making that very plain. Do not say I'm saying any date here, okay? God has not spoken to me about a date. If he does, I'll tell you. Which, by the way, I'll tell you, Prophet Leslie says God never gives dates. And so all we're doing today is just guessing, some good guesses. Now, in January 22 of 2006, Leslie heard the audible voice of God say these 7 newspaper headlines. Then I saw in a night dream Leslie standing holding these newspapers. So I know, as a confirmation to me, that they are true. And that night he said, when the prophecies I gave your wife, speaking of these, begin to come to pass, people from all directions will begin to turn and listen to your ministry. Hallelujah. I look forward to that day. I do not look forward to the day when these things start coming to pass and hard times coming. But the point I'm trying to make today is this one. So it says, Omer ushers in Palestinian state. That one right there. That could be huge, because that could be. Things I'm about to tell you today, I did not know yesterday. This is brand new information as of a few moments ago. But it could be that that takes place in 2024. High probability. Now, we're going to move on through it because I've got lots to cover today. This is what I wish I had yesterday. As soon as I finished recording the program and uploading it, all of a sudden I found this in the next email. This is from Israel National News. Are there under the radar negotiations on a Hashemite kingdom of Palestine? Shehabi's plan is both revolutionary and groundbreaking, the best plan yet presented to end the Jewish-Arab conflict. Wow. Okay, now this is really important, and it's dated. It came out January 4, 2023. I just now saw it. But the point is, the negotiations are still underway. Let me read it. Israel and Saudi Arabia have reportedly begun unbrokered peace negotiations that would be conducted far away from the media and public gaze. Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu made that perfectly clear in his 50-minute interview on Saudi Arabia-controlled Al Arabiya TV on 15 December. You know, I'm sort of a champion of the slight twist in what Woodrow Wilson said in the Versailles Peace Conference. He said, we believe in open covenants openly arrived at. But he says, I believe in open covenants secretly arrived at or discreetly arrived at. That's probably what's going on. And I'm going to show you some more articles in just a second that confirms that. There will have to be discussions about all the questions that you asked today and see how we can advance this. If you try to sort it out in advance, you get stuck. That's what happens. In Israel, we say, climb the tree. Everybody climbs their own tree and says, I'm here and I'm not climbing down. And no matter how many letters you give, in other words, they're determined to get peace. That's what they're trying to say. All of these things need to be discussed discreetly, responsibly, and within the confines of closed meetings, openly. And once we get an agreement, then we can come out. I don't need the public fanfare. I don't need it, you know. If you come to an agreement, it will be publicized. If you don't come to an agreement, nothing happens. I think we could come to amazing agreements. One topic for discussion will surely involve the implementation of the Saudi-based Hashemite Kingdom of Palestinian Solution published by Al Arabiya News on 8th June 2022. Its author, Ali Shabibi, is a confidant of Saudi Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman and a member of the MBS's advisory board on NEOM, a 500 billion megacity built in northwestern Saudi Arabia. I've seen part of it as they're building it, covering an area equal to the size of Israel. Shabibi's plan calls for the merger of Jordan. Are you hearing that? That's important. Calls for the merger of Jordan, Gaza, and part of Judea and Samaria. Okay, that's big. Into one territorial entity to be called the Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine. In other words, they're saying we think we come up with the plan to give the Palestinians a state, a two-state solution. That's huge. Shabibi's plan is both revolutionary and groundbreaking to the best plan yet presented to the end of the Jewish-Arab conflict. Now, let me back up, see if I can jump around here a little bit. Now, Leslie was told Omer ushers in Palestinian state. Since 2006, we have wanted to know what is the Omer. The only thing we can come up with is the counting of the Omer. Well, the counting of the Omer, I looked it up, actually is from April, next year, 2024, is from April 25th to June 11th. April 25th to June 11th, meaning if this thing takes place in 2024, then the high probability this newspaper headline right there may in fact very well take place. And it probably will take place April 25th through June 11th, and that fits with all the other timing that we know about. Now let's keep going here. Shabibi's plan has not been rejected by King Abdullah of Jordan. That's huge, because this is giving apparently all or most of Jordan into this Palestinian plan. And it's saying that the king of Jordan is not objecting to this. In other words, they're saying we're getting real close. Ismail Hananiah, or MBS, in the 7 months since this publication. Yet, incredibly, virtually all of the international media and opinion writers, university professors heading up Middle East faculty departments, well endowed on it. In other words, they're all ignoring it. The media is ignoring it. Well, that may be fine with them, okay? The UN is now seeking an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice. They're saying we are in the final stages of putting together a Palestinian state. If you read what they're saying, that's exactly what they're saying. They're saying we're getting real close. Trashing Shabibi's plan was a UN option, but bearing this game-changing plan, an alternative to the failed two-state solution. What they're saying is we're getting real close to a Palestinian state. Had this group of bedfellows treated Shabibi's plan with the seriousness and analysis it deserved, they might have also discovered one other critically important document, a revised version of Shabibi's 8 June 2022 plan. Bearing Shabibi's plan has ironically given Israel and Jordan the freedom to negotiate under the radar amendments to Shabibi's plan long before now look at this, this is important, U.S. negotiations commenced. So the people behind this is the U.S., specifically Biden and his buddies. So it's not going to be good. I'm going to put this in here. This was in the article, and it says, shh, are secret negotiations between Bibi and the Saudi prince going on? Are they discussing the creation of a Hashemite kingdom of Palestine? Well, according to the articles I'm about to show you, yes, they are. Netanyahu prepared to quit in return for an Israeli-Saudi peace deal. That's huge. They've been trying to pry this guy out of office for 20 or 30 years. The prime minister is committed to making any deal with Saudis possible, even at the price of toppling his own government. In other words, him basically quitting. Another article. New York Times, Tom Friedman says, don't let Bibi make peace with the Saudis. Okay, this is the bad side, saying, no, we don't want peace with the Saudis. It says Biden is appeasing the anti-Israeli lobby, and cooperation between the U.S. and Israel remains intact. So, yes, America's right in the middle of it, and apparently they're getting really, really close to a Palestinian state. Cooperation between the U.S. and Israel remains intact, and some say is even improving. There will be very likely a meeting between the Prime Minister and President this fall. Did you catch that? See, we're looking for the dates April 25 to June 11. If they come out with a Palestinian state agreement during those dates, there's a high probability the newspaper headline will read, Omer ushers in Palestinian state, just like Leslie was told January 22 of 2006. Let's go on. Even worse, it appears that some kind of peace agreement between Saudi Arabia and Israel under American sponsorship, that's the second time it says that Americans are twisting the arms of the Jews,
Wow.
is going to happen. It's probably going to require only the barest Israeli concessions. So Israel is going to get the best deal, but that still doesn't make it good. Bibi isn't serious about preventing a regional nuclear arms race because why? He seems willing to allow Saudi nukes in exchange for normalization. No, it's not normalization. What they're saying is Bibi is making some big concessions because Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan, and the Palestinians apparently are very, very close to putting together Omer ushers in Palestinian state. And if they have this big meeting, the latter part of this year, as the article says, it could very well be between the dates of April 25th and June 11th. Remember those dates? April 25th, June 11th of 2024. We could see the headline, Omer ushers in Palestinian state. That's the reason I urge you to send this program out to all of your email lists. Send it out to all of them. Because when it comes to pass, then they're going to come back to you and they're going to say, okay, you have my attention. What else is going on? And then they're going to start listening. Furthermore, Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu thanks Saudi Arabia for the kind treatment of stranded Israelis as warming relations grow. On down, it says that Israelis are officially restricted from traveling to Saudi Arabia, but it's saying that the relations are warming up. That's huge, my brothers and sisters. That's huge. And as further confirmation, I intend to achieve peace with Saudi Arabia. Obviously, it's talking about Bibi here. So we're getting really close to Omer ushers in Palestinian state. Now, let me summarize this for you. So 40 years since Dimitri Dudman was told it'll start with an internal revolution. The hurricane apparently has hit America. BRICS gold-backed currency will go live January 1. Oil has been sold in a currency other than dollars. Shabibi's plan to split Israel is apparently in progress. Now, further confirmation. This is a biblical significance of August 21, 2017 and April 8, 2024. A total solar eclipse are the warnings of coronavirus, war, earthquakes, and famine, it says. U.S. Resolution 242 calls for Israel to give up land, and the eclipse line divides the land of Israel, or the land of the U.S. So what a lot of people are saying is this eclipse takes place right in the middle of when we're talking about. Okay, so it takes place on, what was the date? April 8th. That's real close to April the 25th when the counting of the Omer starts. And look where it is. That's right in the middle of the Mississippi River Valley, which is the New Madrid Fault. So it may very well be. It's predicting a big earthquake would hit America then. Now, I don't know that for sure. Let me refresh you. Of the 130 speakers we had at the Prophecy Club over a 25-year period, this one is my favorite. Henry Gruver's been in my home many times. We've had him on many tours. I don't know, he's made 5 or 6 DVDs with Prophecy Club. Go to watchprophecyclub.com and watch this. Now, so I know, I mean, he's right up there with a Dimitri Duduman. When Henry Gruver has something from the Lord, I believe it. So this is like a 10 on a credibility level. So this is a summarized version of his vision, not a dream, it was a vision. Henry says, I opened the door to see DJ T and his wife dressed like a king. His wife is carrying a shawl on his left arm made of gold tweed with big royal jewels in it, literally gold and jewels. Mr. Trump, I'll go ahead and say the word. To what do we owe the honor of your visit? He said, oh, Henry, never mind. We're family. This is just a family visit. And I just came to see you. He sits down. His wife puts his shawl over his shoulders and it drapes down in front of him and stands beside him. It is beautiful made for royalty. Now, hang on. Could it be that when Trump comes back, he doesn't come back as president of a failed corporation? That's with all caps, as in the U.S. corporation called the United States of America. Could it be that he comes back as royalty, just as Henry was told? Could it be that he comes back as king? You see, president has limited authority. The authority that the laws give him and the Congress gives him and the courts give him and he's constantly being harassed. But a king, no one questions the king, just like with King Nebuchadnezzar, whom he would, he slew. Whom he would, he kept alive. And that's the kind of authority it would take to clean up America right now. A kingly authority where whatever he says goes. And there is no questions. The whole visit was strictly family. He was asking about our different children and how we're doing, and we were visiting. Finally, he stands up and says, well, I've got a lot to do, and says, you know, I'll be back. I'll be back. Now he says, I'll be back twice. That's in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let everything be established. After the limo drives off, I wave my arms, trying to tell him he left his shawl. Then I hear his voice speak from behind me saying, he'll be back. That's 3 times. 2 of them are audible voices, and then the third was audible voice speaking behind him 3 times. And I say, wow, okay. And the vision ended. This is saying that Donald John Trump will return, but not as president of a failed U.S. corporation. Instead, he'll return as king. Now, as a confirmation, Anita Walker, back in 2021, had this dream, I guess it was. The TV came on and made the sound of emergency broadcast system, like in the 1980s. And did you know that there is a test of the emergency broadcast system coming October the 5th? Remember that? So could it be this is going to be happening October 5th of 2023? I don't know. Emergency broadcast system came on like in the 1980s with that emergency beeping sound that we all remember back in the day. And a voice came across the TV saying, we have tragic news. JB died. The vision shifted to KH and NP, plotting how KH would become number 1 and P would become number 2. They could put in place all the bad things they had planned. It went silent, and the vision shifted back to the same voice saying, America will not go without a president due to the cheating. DJT is now your president, and the vision ended. That's 2 people saying the same things, my brothers and sisters. This is real serious. Now let's jump to Jack Ruby. Had a dream, April 2, 2021. I saw an armored battalion of tanks, Humvees, and roof-mounted machine guns and armored personnel carriers with cannons go to the Capitol, the Supreme Court, and the White House. Army personnel disarmed all Secret Servicemen, guards, police guarding those 3 buildings. Then the Army personnel went back into all 3 different buildings and took whatever they wanted. He saw the military take temporary control of the nation to arrest the evildoers. That would mean they put DJT as king, not president, king, okay? The wrongdoers, and that's the way the Constitution would have it done. Under certain circumstances, the military can step in and take temporary control of the nation in order to put things back in order. And that's what I saw. Barry Wunsch, 2021, vision. I woke up at 1:30. I saw the front cover of the newspaper. Victory. DJT sweeps the nation. Of course, it had his real name in it. It was time for the nation to celebrate like after a time of war. Celebration comes. I saw masses of people coming out onto the streets with American flags celebrating. There was still some work to be done. There was still high tension in the air, but I was taken to a fence line outside of the White House and saw a huge crowd gathering. The American people came out onto the streets to see what was going on. I saw people who had been had conspired and engineered evil surrounded inside the White House with nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. It was the end for them. I saw military troops supporting for safety entering into the White House and other buildings and escort out the evil ones like prisoners of war. Brought out under the front lawn of the White House, lined up row upon row in handcuffs and shackles. Their day was over. The crowd cheered with great outbursts as each group was brought out and put into display. The people in the streets cheered as the evil was being dealt with. The patriots were singing anthems and songs of victory in the streets, giving thanks unto God. All the corrupted ones were extracted and marched into the streets, surrounded by army, marching them through the streets in humiliation. They were about to face the consequences of all of their evil corruption. They were brought into a portable holding area like a mobile army base unit for processing to face righteous judges. They were going on trial, facing justice for the highest of consequences, and would get all that they had coming to them for their crimes against humanity. Then I'm taken to the inauguration ceremony for DJT, surrounded by military. DJT is inaugurated as President of the United States. There was no showboating. It was serious business. The job was finished and time to heal and rebuild. I saw the public opposed DJT instantly see the truth that they could no longer deny. They could now see the evil that had been done by these corrupt ones, and the spirit of anarchy in them was broken. I saw big military cargo planes, open ramps, and special teams from the United States, loaded pallets of legal documents departing to other nations to go and do likewise to foreign dignitaries awaiting their arrival in other nations. Plans were strategically set in place to arrest and bring foreign corrupt leaders to justice. The world will never be the same. I watched them deploy into nations after nations, and they rejoiced in the streets of justice was served, and freedom, truth, and righteousness flowed like waters. Those who were left standing had a great reward. It was revival time, a time to heal, so great things are coming. Guys, as you're listening to this, you know this is true. This fits in line with just about everything we know. Now let's go to 2022, Timothy Dixon.
Except America's not going to have a big comeback. That's the only problem with that.
I heard the EBS warning sound.
I don't think anyway.
The same thing, emergency broadcast system. Then it came over our telephone phones and an alert saying, stay tuned. This is the emergency broadcast system alert. You'll be advised to turn to your local radio or TV station to hear the accurate message from the President of the United States. We turned on our TV and it was President Trump saying, this is Donald Trump, the President of the United States. It is 5 o'clock this evening, Eastern Standard Time. The United States is in a joint military operation now underway to regain control of the Capitol as it was breached by a foreign agency and a foreign identity. Plain-looking pickup trucks, some black, some brown, were putting people inside and coming out of the Capitol and the White House. Then the TV went blank, totally blank. A man appeared to me and rose, sitting in a chair, saying, can you hear the sound of chains rattling? Can you hear the sound of chains rattling? And I heard a very loud rattling of chains. See, this fits with what Dimitri was told. The fall of America will start with an internal revolution in America started by the communists. So while this is good to start, it doesn't end well. Too bad America has not repented and received Jesus. Now let's jump down to Terry Bennett in the middle. December 10 through 14, 2001. Part of what Terry Bennett was told, for a while we'll have a fractional government. The military will have to step in and seize control of our federal government, should call it a coup. But while in all honesty, it'll be to help our nation. That's why the military will step in. That ties together with what I just read about Jack Rigney's dream. It may be that we're getting really, really close to those 7 newspaper headlines starting, and it may be real close to seeing our nation have a new king, not necessarily a president. So we will see how it all works out. It took me about 20 minutes to make these 2 loaves in my kitchen at an ingredient cost of about $12 each. In a time of food shortage and emergency, I'm going to cut.
Okay, guys, I'm going to call it a night. I'll take this back. Yeah. Okay, guys. God bless.
And it was
See you tomorrow,
President
guys.
Trump saying, "This is Donald Trump, the president of the United